All right, hard yarners. Today's episode is brought to you by Raunchy Brewing Co. A beer that's actually good. It's a bloody good beer. I like the stout. Tastes good. You can get it on tap, or link is in our bio and our Instagram if you would like to have a taste. It's great. I love it. And I definitely recommend it if you're going to drink alcohol, but we don't condone drinking too
When I break
much.
my sobriety, let's go raunchy.
We'll have a raunchy, yeah. We also, as you would have just seen there for people who are watching, we are brought to you by alltradescover.com.au for all things that are covered by trades generally. Any sort of incidents, any sort of issues with clients or whatever, get on board with alltradescover.com.au. They're absolute legends, and they'll help you out and sort you out with that. Also, I have a little one. This is one. I'm not going to do this all the time, but I lost a bet. So I'm not going to say what the bet was, but Reed White & Co., my local cafe, he's a fucking legend. I love him. Yeah, he won the bet, so I've given him a shout out. I've given him a shout out a few times anyway because it's a fucking good cafe and I actually like the coffee, and he is like-minded. So if you ever want to go have a little conversation about stuff that we've talked about today, get down to Reed White & Co. And all the guys and girls that listen that I've bumped into at the cafe, whether they've gone there intentionally or not, it's cool seeing you, and I love hearing from you and your feedback at the cafe. So... but today was potentially an episode that finally gets us cancelled.
I would love that. Would that be the first one?
That gets us cancelled?
Yeah. Oh, well, not you cancelled. Have you had full episodes taken down before?
No, but this actually could.
Potentially. I don't think I went into enough detail. I purposely withheld some things to give a bit of vagueness for that. But
I think we had a very good open dialogue about some very controversial topics, I guess. I guess today was Chloe. Did I say Geddes?
Geddes. Clo Geddes.
Clo Geddes.
Yeah.
From...
let's not start with that one.
Okay, let's not start with that. But,
Chloe from the School of Life.
What did we talk about today? Do you recall?
I don't really recall the first part of it. We talked about vaccines and freedom of choice. Mm-hmm. We touched a little bit on The Voice.
Yes, we did.
See how you feel about that one. I'm interested on the feedback.
We vaguely touched on that one, but yes, yeah.
Someone needs to be having the discussion, and the government sure aren't. We also talked about diets, culture, and some things that have worked for us and things that haven't, and
fluoride in the water. This is
I'm giving you a little tinfoil charcuterie to see.
Yeah, but I think we discussed it in
where we all fit.
Very good.
No,
way.
I mean for the listeners.
Yeah,
give them a little bit of everything. We talked about feminism a little bit. We talked
Feminism.
about hormones. We talked about
the pill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not medical advice, but.
Yeah, wow.
Chuck it in the bin.
This is a very good episode. I think it's about a 2 hour, 2 hours 50, nearly a 3 hour.
I'm so sorry.
I really need a wee, but this was fucking awesome. And I said it at the end of the episode, but this is one of my favourite episodes. It just felt good, felt easy, and we touched on a lot of topics that I'm pretty passionate about.
Let's put it to the people.
Yeah, autism. That one's going to ruffle some feathers. This episode is going to ruffle some feathers, but I think you guys are going to fucking love it. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you so much for having me. Can
Cheers.
I say it?
Yeah.
Let's get hard.
Let's get hard.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Delby.
And Cameron Branch.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
How do I sound?
It's like It's weird because I've listened to it at home on my phone, and now you're sitting across from me, and I'm watching you do it. But
that's what David Reynolds said.
Oh yeah,
David Reynolds is a V8 supercar driver, so you probably wouldn't have
I
listened
don't
to that
listen
episode.
to those episodes. I listen to, my friends that are on here.
Yeah.
And then most comedians, and then I did listen to.
You listen to the comedians.
I listen to the comedians.
Not many people listen to the comedians.
It's a bit of a gross thing. I'm embarrassed to admit that I'm a comedy fan through and through. I actually do like to go and watch it live.
No, you're good. Yeah,
I don't laugh though.
I seen you the other night.
Have you noticed I don't laugh?
Yes, you're very.
I just sit staunchly in the back judging everyone.
Yeah, it's not, and it's good to have people in the scene. People who like the scene and that are fans as well, but like to also be involved. Because you know what I found?
Yes.
A lot of people don't like. They sort of get this. It's almost like a jealousy. They're like, nah, if they're doing well, I don't want to go watch them. I don't want to support. It's like, yeah, it's not everyone.
Yeah.
I think there's a good crew here going on, but I see it.
I grew up watching way too much of it, and I was a massive, and still am a massive Louis C.K. fan.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, and so I watched all of those, and then I kind of went back and I watched a lot of Bill Hicks and a lot of George Carlin, and from there it just kind of got more obscure, and I sorted out. And now, because I know a couple of them, I feel like I'm justified to go into a venue and be like,
yeah, fuck yeah.
But yeah,
but no, thank you so much for coming on.
thank you.
Thank you for pestering me.
I bullied Cam into this podcast.
No, it was great. I met you at was it the Festival of Free Speech? Conference?
It changed names, I think, halfway through, but it was originally the Malhotra tour, and then Perth kind of became the flagship event and changed completely in terms of
it was great,
the lineup. But yeah, it was incredible.
Oh, how good was it? And we've mentioned it a couple of times on the pod. John Chipton, Ed Dowd, Malhotra.
Incredible. And I got a very, very backseat view of all of that. I was lucky to be in some of the rooms with them and have a chat with John, who I absolutely adore.
I really wanted the opportunity to have a chat to him, and I'd love the chance to get him on the podcast at some point, because what's happening to Assange is disgusting, and hearing him talk about it was just... And we spoke to Corey about this the other day.
Yeah.
It's heartwarming.
It is. It's... I don't know if you... Have you watched Ithaca?
No.
I keep saying to everyone, go and watch it. It's on... Are we allowed to mention streamers? Yes.
Yeah,
it's on Stan and also ABC iView if you feel like giving them the views. But it's a 2-part documentary, and it's essentially his and Stella's story through the COVID time and what they were doing with kind of the legal proceedings and stuff. But it gives an insight into who he is as a man as well. And I think that that's something that I said to him that night. I said, obviously with Julian's plight and what he's going through is so awful, and we have to do everything we can to bring him home.
It's like they're trying to break him.
Yeah, absolutely they are. That's the whole thing now, is to write him off as a madman and keep him imprisoned forever.
And thank you for bringing me these stickers.
You are more than welcome.
What is it? So publish government secrets. I love it.
Yes, I encourage civil disobedience wherever possible.
Anyone who's watching at home, you can see them. Exposing war crimes is not a crime. I love that one. Journalism is not a crime. Exactly. What's this little, what are they called?
Oh, it's a QR code. It takes you to the Assange campaign website. So this is the thing. So I met John. I've met him twice in the past 12 months. One was at a rally in Forest Chase at the end of last year. And then
is he WA?
Then at the Malhotra event. No, I think he's Melbourne. Okay. I don't know for sure. He's got a young daughter, actually. I think she's only like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
But, I've met him twice, and it's really hard to look someone in the eye and what is happening to their child, and then just kind of go back to your normal life. And so I've been thinking of even dumb little ways like stickers to just raise awareness, because I think that that's a part of the problem, is he's completely left public consciousness.
Yes.
And people go, oh, well, it was the allegations of sexual assault. that's what he's in there for. And it's like, well, you don't even understand what he's in there for, the implications of that for all of us if this proceeds any further. So I think awareness is an important thing.
Oh, 100%.
But yeah, John is an incredible man. Sorry, just finishing
No.
that story I said before. But just the measure of a man. Like he said this in Ithaca, he says this line. He's used to build homes. That was his job. And he says, the home is the stage for the theatre of life. And who talks like that these days? Like,
It's
no
so
one
poetic.
talks like that. So, yeah, I think I'm stewing. I'm stewing some ideas. We'll think of, like, the activism has to take a turn
I
now.
was shocked to see Assange on mainstream media the other day and the news that potentially he could be sent home.
I haven't read that. I have been in a deep, dark abyss of organising an event recently. So
I don't know where it went, and Robbie Tedeschi did mention it, that they were deliberating on some stuff the other day. I didn't follow up and check what the end result was. But yeah, I don't watch news, but my parents do.
yeah,
And so I sit at the desk and I just sort of scroll through my phone doing my thing, maybe working, maybe playing with my daughter, whatever I'm doing. And then Assange popped up in my ear. I went, what? and I turned and watched. And there was a hope that they're going to send him home and not to America.
Albo talked up a big game when he was in opposition, and so I think he should be delivering on that.
Oh, 100%.
And yeah, it's something I think about and pray about a lot. But yeah, the event was amazing on that level personally for me. And then obviously seeing old mate up in front of 2,500 people doing his thing.
Corey doing his thing. Yeah.
Give him a mention because he's the one who introduced me to
I love Corey. But
you. I bullied
fuck,
him
mate,
before I bullied you to get on here.
that was a setup that was teeing the ball up, and he could have said anything there and fucking blew up the room. But it was it was a great, manifestation and it was a great showing.
It was a metaphor for or just a very visual metaphor for the journey that he'd been on.
Oh yeah, the hill that he chose to sort of
and
die
where
on.
he was in that moment, and it was just this beautiful moment in that kind of journey and his trajectory from here on out. I've got a lot of love for artists who are really committed to the craft and to evolving, and who show up really truthfully regardless of what gets thrown at them. It's very, very rare these days, and he's one of the people who does that.
He's one of those ones as well, not to give him a big head or suck up his ass too much.
Absolutely, we are. Get it out of the way in the first bit.
He very vocally opposed things. And we at this podcast, you could say that we oppose stuff, but we opposed it within reason. I never gave away my vax status. People could have assumed, but I never once on the podcast until a certain time recently said I was unvaccinated or vaccinated. I just said I was opposed to mandates and blah, blah, blah.
How do you feel about that? Because I have listened to the podcast for a bit now.
Oh, thank you.
And I've had feelings about it because I'm someone who has opposed vaccines prior to COVID.
Yes.
I'm coming out.
Yeah.
And so it was a very different experience, I think, for people that were in that bracket with me, because we did see very early on that it was happening. I mean, I've got my own feelings about how I acted in that, because I very much kept quiet about it and just suffered silently for quite a significant portion of it. But people who did compromise and with the mandates that maybe they didn't necessarily agree with it but complied,
which was a lot, and people who didn't kind of disclose those things, there was a real resentment that I had, unfortunately, for it. I mean, that's mine to deal with, obviously. Yeah. But resentment that they didn't openly say they were opposed to it?
I think so, because it was kind of that's when we needed you. There was a real moment where we could have all gone, oh, well, actually we won't work, and you see how this system, how long this continues.
I privately amongst friends and certain people said, no, I'm not vaccinated and I'm not getting vaccinated. But when it came to the public forum, I still had a job that I was trying to keep in. And I'm very open to say about it now. I lied to the organisation that I was working for and showed them a fake vaccine passport, and that's what I had to do to keep my job and to make sure I could put food on the table for my daughter. And that's fucking disgusting that it had to happen in the first place. But it didn't have. They weren't tinfoil hat reasons. Yeah, they were very valid reasons that I did not feel comfortable getting vaccinated. And most importantly, I didn't need it. I wasn't one of the people who needed it. And I understand there was a place for certain people who, out of desperation, may have needed or required something along those lines. But I didn't. I've kind of have to come to a little conclusion of it, of like we all have our own things to deal with how we acted and went about that kind of situation and the decisions that we've made. I mean, mine is a kind of resentment of, oh, look, I really saw a moment for this kind of cultural shift. But I also felt that way when Donald Trump was elected in 2016. I was like, here's the opportunity. He's inflamed the left and the progressive. They're going to realize the government is a sham and we're going to be like building better communities. And that did not happen. So, yeah, I've got my little things to deal with. But I suppose, you know. What do you think? There's a hardness to deal with compromising on like a value and your own kind of bodily sovereignty and autonomy. Why do you think people just so willingly just went along with it? Just trusted blindly? Because the past, the past 10 to 15 years, the 20, 30 years had taught us that just because a pharmaceutical company says something is safe and effective doesn't necessarily mean it's safe and effective. And usually the profits are prioritized over the benefit to all. So, like, why do you think in that vein, everyone understood that and everyone agreed with that, and they understood that profits will always be the priority. But then when it came to this, they were like, oh no, they have our best interest at heart and they would never lie to us. Why do you think, was it fear? Because it was drummed into us. It was drummed into us that we're all going to die, or if we're not going to die, someone close to us is going to die. Yeah. What do you think? I think it was fear. Tell me. Yeah, look, here's the thing. It's really hard for me to separate COVID as a situation because of the length of time that I've been, it sounds silly to say involved in this world, but just in terms of like, I mean, even my upbringing, right? My parents were younger. I had a very open childhood in terms of like thinking critically. Like September 11 happened and Alex Jones was on in the background, you know, like a week later, and that was partly a soundtrack to my childhood that I was absolutely terrified of, by the way. Yeah. Like he was the death bringer in my household. Yeah. But then I also went and saw Fahrenheit 9/11 and realized, oh, this is a sham. Like government have no interest in people and they're really just lining their own pocket and protecting those people that want to exploit us. So for me, it's really hard to look at that as like an independent thing. I think, yes, there was a very coordinated fear campaign specifically around that issue, but I would also have to say there's been a very complex propaganda campaign that has like been built upon, you could argue, for 100 years. And for me, there's the only absolute in this world is that there are no absolutes. So I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but that's what I truly believe. The only absolute is that there are no absolutes. And that nothing happens at the wrong time. That's mine. But so to suggest that something is safe and effective for all, or fucking, the September 11 thing was completely what's the word? There was a level of, we could say there's a level of orchestration at play. Correct, yes. To suggest that it wasn't and blah, that sort of stuff. I'm never like all in on anything. No. I'm just like, look, we can have 90% of this. Yeah, there's room for movement here and there. But all I saw, especially in the last 2 years, was like, no, shut the fuck up. You're wrong. Because we're at that point. We're at that point in the storyline. I think it's a Napoleon quote, which is, don't put to malice what could be put to incompetence.
And that was, I think, similarly to what you're saying, is like you're never going to put it all in there. Benefit of the doubt in a way, but it's become impossibly difficult to do that in the current day and age. And I think that is just the natural progression of the propaganda, is like, well, you've accepted this much. Now we're not even going to treat you as if you have the intelligence to think outside of it. Just deal with it.
And the room for open dialogue was completely nil. There was no like, hey, I have these concerns about this side of things. What can we do to at least, mitigate my concerns?
Yes.
Like there was no like, okay, I understand your concerns. This is the reason this is going to work, and this is the issue here, blah, blah, blah. There was none of that. It was just shut the fuck up and do as you're told.
Yeah, and emotionally manipulate prior to that. There was a massive guilt trip that was put on all of us. I think that's also why when I talk about it, or like the issue of vaccines in general, is that I like to talk more about the socioeconomic things at play. Excuse me.
That's not good.
Because that affects everyone.
Yeah.
And it also widens the discussion. Like with the science aspect of it, that is on the person to go and do their own investigation.
Yes.
I actually...
Well, apparently saying do your research, do your own research.
Yes, but you got to be smart about it. See, like when I talk about the science, I'm talking about the product information statements. I'm talking about all of like the government issued documentation, because it's like, well, you can't answer this question for me. Therefore, I'm gonna leave that with you until you can, and then I'll make my decision.
And this idea that it's a grand conspiracy amongst every single person delivering the information, no, that's not necessarily correct. You look at the FDA has given us false information in the past around the addictive nature of OxyContin and all these sorts of things. So, like, if they're funded and paid for by the pharmaceutical companies, of course they're going to manipulate the data, and they're going to give people the wrong information, false data, to support their arguments that's going to help the people that are paying the money.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of more back on the idea of vaccines, I think the healthiest way to look at it is on a spectrum, funnily enough, of risk versus benefits. And like everyone falls somewhere in that. So like when I have the conversation, I kind of refuse to take on the title of anti-vaxxer. Because that's immediately someone's... well, there are people who wear it very proudly. But I just think it's so much more nuanced than that. And it deserves that conversation. Like, your argument is that I would like for you to have a more individualized like medical care. That you want me in this age of lived experience is valid and means everything, that you're asking me to discount all of this in this very important decision moving forward.
Yes.
And like what I'm fighting for, I can only speak for myself, is just for everyone to have the right to informed consent. Do with it what you want.
Which is the thing the people I feel the most for are the children that had no say in whether or not they would be vaccinated against COVID-19 without any data suggesting that it would be safe or effective for children. None. Absolutely zero. I think there was mild data suggesting it would be safe, potentially, but no long-term data.
No.
And so these parents, out of fear, I don't hate on the parents because they were scared. Of course, if there was something for my children that was for my child, my daughter, if there was something that could potentially harm my child, I'd be very, very, I'd be acting out of fear. I'd be fucking, I don't care about me, but as soon as it's going to affect my daughter. So I understand why people got their children vaccinated, because they were drummed with this fear that they're going to die as well. But you literally vaccinated and medicated your child with a untested medication on children, or if it is tested, it's not tested thoroughly, and with no data suggesting it's going to do anything regardless. So you've taken a risk for nothing, and which is...
I would argue that about a lot of vaccines on the market currently, but that's where I deviate from a lot of other people.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to... I'm not one of these people who suggest that all... I won't dive into it and say all vaccines aren't beneficial. I think there's benefit to certain vaccinations, potentially, as far as I can see. One thing that really interested me was finding out recently, and I made a massive assumption with this, and I didn't find this out until about 3 or 4 years ago. But 3 or 4, I guess, is quite recently, that there's no, and I see RFK's sort of talking about this as well now publicly, that there's no long-term double-blind placebo safety data
correct. Yeah,
on any vaccinations ever. I really don't understand.
After the last 3-4 years, you don't understand?
But what I don't understand is why has this not been talked about prior? Like, why has this not gone, hey, like, there's no tests to show? And I didn't know this. I thought potentially that was a sniff when someone said this, and then when we had Fauci was sued for it by RFK.
That's what you're referring to, is the release of those safety documents. I think it was 2018. They did put in him and Del Bigtree,
2016,
RFK,
I think it was, yeah.
Junior and Del Bigtree put in a Freedom of Information request for the safety documentation, and then it could not be provided.
Yeah.
And then they had to come out and say that it didn't exist.
Yeah. Which is, like, what the fuck?
Yes. It's insane. I think most vaccines don't have like any adverse effects recorded after about 5 to 10 days.
Okay.
I think is pretty standard. So anything that happens after that is not because of that, can be attributed to anything else. There's also a lot of sketchy practices in terms of the pools of people who've received them and how they're observed. There's a brilliant book, which I haven't read because it hasn't been released, but I'm very excited to. That's by Dr. Brian Hooker, and it's called Vaxxed Unvaxxed, and it is actually a look at a cohort of unvaccinated children and vaccinated children, which is, again, something. So, I mean, one of my personal gripes, because I also have a child, he's 5, and I won't disclose his status, but, we'll understand anyway. But one of my personal gripes is the no jab, no play and no jab, no pay.
It's
it's gross. But to the point that we're not even allowed to organise, like, so you couldn't have a daycare centre that was just for parents who have made that decision. And in a free society, you would think, oh, well, okay, so if my child is perceived as a threat to public health in that way, can we maybe congregate at least, like, not with you? Like, if you're worried about us, which you shouldn't be if your products work, can we do our own thing? And that's not allowed. And it's like, well, I wonder why they don't want a group of unvaccinated children observable in that way, in terms of are they having as much transmission of, like, colds and communicable diseses together?
The immunity.
What do their milestones look like compared to children who have adhered to the schedule? They don't want us or those children to be seen.
I've always found it interesting because I have some very close friends who their first child got vaccinated and had some very severe reactions, tics, convulsions, swelling, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And I think they chose not to get the second round specifically because of that. They got an exemption, which was great. I think there was an issue still getting daycare and whatnot. The second child, they decided not to risk it at all because of the genetic mutations in his DNA. And so...
that may be the MTHFR gene, I think, that they do testing. There's been a suggestion that can increase your likelihood of having adverse reactions.
So, but they had to suffer the fate of not being able to put their child into daycare because of their own child's medical issue, stopping him from getting that. And that...
I feel for it. Look, I'm a single mother on Centrelink who works in medical freedom advocacy as a volunteer. So I totally understand the stresses of that. But I mean, for myself, I was aware of it when I had my son. I knew what the consequences of certain decisions would be and just went with, like, that was my line. Everyone's got a different one. I said, I'm not going to compromise on this, and I suffer the kind of consequences of that. Does that make it right? In a country like this one, I would say no.
So what I understand, like it's everyone's right to choose, especially we're advocating for medical freedom and autonomy. It's everyone's right to choose to get vaccinated as well. And I can see that, yes, not potentially, I can see vaccines have help with things like polio and whatnot. I don't know, you smirk over there, but
I'm just like,
but
yes.
yeah. So we see that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that not only are we seeing, not only if they're curing polio, or stopping you from getting polio, for example, doesn't mean they're not necessarily causing other things long term, chronic illness and whatnot. People will often point to with something like the polio vaccine, and they'll point to the data suggesting, well, this is when vaccines were introduced, and we can see here on the table.
Graphs?
Well, no, but the ones that we're shown, and I'll let you rebut.
Yeah.
But they'll show that it's this is where it's introduced, and we can see a massive spike down in the numbers, and that I would argue, well, correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. But then when I show them the data, there's a all-cause mortality spike in 2021 when mandates for young adults were introduced, and you can see that there. Well, correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. So in one side, it's correlation does mean causation, and in the other side, it doesn't mean. So and they're both vaccine-based. It basically just it's cherry picking what they want to sell their products. But what were you going to say?
I was going to say
that's
cherry pick is a very good phrase to kind of lead off
because we're obviously but you could argue, and I'll let you speak in a moment. You could argue, I guess, obviously, in that 2021 period, we also had lack of doctors being able to be seen, and people mental health problems, and blah 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 blah. So then you could say, well, it's an indication that our actions that we took were probably not as good, or they were worse. We shouldn't have had in the lockdowns and whatnot. Okay, that could be a thing. But then you're also forgetting that, polio vaccine came out, but also our hygiene improved and medical practices improved. Like everything has improved as well. You can say that with fluoride. Fluoridation of the water, for example. People often point to the improvement in our dental
calcifying
records.
the pineal gland. Don't drink the tap water, people.
I agree, but they'll often point to that data and then completely disregard the fact that we improved our dental hygiene. That we improved these sorts of things instead of just saying it's that correlation doesn't equal causation. They just it's the constant. It's what I constantly hear to whatever they want to push their narrative.
Yeah, it was a clusterfuck of a situation, and now we're just kind of swimming in a toxic soup. There's a lot there. Like I'm going off in like 4 different directions with things you've just said. Let's go to cherry picking. I'll start at cherry picking.
Okay, cool.
So with those graphs that you're referring to, and they say like, look at how much it improved with the introduction of the polio vaccine, with a lot, and you can look these up as well. Those graphs, I might have to link in later, I don't know. They have started them at a certain point in history, and then you go back another, 50, 60 years, and you see that it's up here. You see the levels of those diseases are up here, and they're actually already going down on their own, and then the vaccines introduced like right at the bottom, like where it's here, and then it drops a little bit. Yeah. So you can make the argument that there is some efficacy with them. What the payoff is of that is another discussion, and something that deserves to be investigated. I think that's the main issue for me, is it's like, well, we're not even being allowed to ask the question about those either. Following on from that, I will say an amazing document and book, so I think people should go and support her if they feel inclined to, because she is just the most, like, she's taken a lot of arrows for this movement, and that Dr. Judy Wileman, I don't know if you've ever heard of her work or met her. She wrote a thesis in 2015 for the University of Wollongong. Initially, it was in the Department of Sciences, and then it got moved to Humanities. And her thesis was a critical analysis of the Australian government's rationale for its vaccination policy. So what she does is go into all of the stakeholders of that and outlines why this is such a corrupt and unjust kind of policy in itself. Yeah, she's an incredible woman. But those things need to be taken into consideration too.
Of course.
If we're making decisions about our own health, it's like, well, who's benefiting from this? Am I benefiting from this? Is someone getting paid if I do this? And also just like informed consent in general is something that I'm a massive proponent for. And that was not evident during the past 4 years. It hasn't really been evident before that, because I think a lot of people, and I don't want to just harp on about vaccines the entire time. There's so many things that play into our health, and like I'm happy to jump into like talking about food as well.
Yes.
Like,
but
that's a massive part of it. I don't want to sit here and be, I guess, kind of pigeonholed and like, oh yeah, vaccines are the only problem, because they're so not. That's that toxic soup. It's our agricultural practices. It's pollution in the air. It's microplastics. It's all of that stuff.
It comes back to what I was saying before. There are no absolutes. It's not like this is the problem and that is the problem. There is a multitude of issues, and they're all connected to individual choices.
Yes.
Not necessarily the one thing has had an impact on everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, so like when I guess specifically if you're talking about childhood schedule and childhood illnesses or like chronic conditions, there is a lot at play there, and like you do have to take into consideration a child's diet and where they're living, and like there's a massive difference between kids who are living up north in mining towns and their health outcomes and kids who are living down here.
And so why don't we see people suggesting, well, when we introduce vaccines, this comes down, but when we introduce vaccines, this goes up? And for example, let's say autism or, chronic illness. Chronic illness is less controversial to say than the autism side. But when you see a spike in chronic illness, when the introduction in, I think, 1989, when they tripled the bloody amounts of vaccination.
Yeah, that was conveniently after the act that allowed vaccine companies to, is it indemnify the correct word? Basically could not be prosecuted for or like fined for any injury that they caused. It goes through a private vaccine court. I think they've paid over $4.5 billion out, with the average payment being about $500,000.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But no one seems to point to the issues in the increases in chronic illness, and then instead they say, we now have the tools to identify it. And so there's always something so which one is it? Is it the the spike and the changes are I guess they're a consequence of our inclusion of it, or are they not? Like it's either way. You can't have it both. You can't say it's not an issue because of this and then it is for that. Like it's this. Yeah,
it's like everything has a level or equal kind of input into the kind of situation we find ourselves in.
And again, I'm not here to demonize all vaccines.
No.
And I'm not here to.
That's my job.
Yes, but to not be able to have these open discussions makes me go, this is dodgy. If you're not allowed to question it, if you're not allowed to have any form of nuanced conversation about this is a bit of an issue, how about we change this a little bit? Why can't we have these conversations? Why is it shut the fuck up and do as you're told?
Or even don't have the conversation and just allow people to make decisions for their own life. I mean, this is, and I did kind of want to talk about, get into these kinds of things, which is cool. Yeah. Just because I don't get to talk about them very often with people.
Go for it. You've got a platform.
But just in terms of the way that we function with each other. So I try not to be too ideologically minded or attached in that way. I just let things pass through. And as I was walking here, I was going, you're probably going to enter this conversation with one set of opinions and walk out with another, because that's just the way that my brain works. But I have found very interesting this kind of political, I don't want to call it an ideology, but a line of thought, which is agorism or agorism. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. It's pretty fun. It's the fun one.
Okay.
So it sits under anarchy, but it's essentially all social interactions are done on a basis of voluntary exchange. So you and I have to go, yes, I want to do this business together. And if you say, well, no, I don't want to, all I do is say, cool, dude, have a nice day.
Yeah.
And then it's by way of counter economics. So it's you and I also recognize that our common enemy, if you want to call it that, is the state.
Yes.
And that what we're doing by way of counter economics is exposing that. And so I'm super into that at the moment.
Well, that's one thing I'm quite open to being proudly anti-establishment.
Yes, me too. It's I think it's the only way to be these days. But it's I don't know. It seems like very unacceptable as well. Look, I'm just thinking about fun things of like counter economics now.
Yeah.
What was your question before?
Don't know, but you were going down
Just going down the road of anarchy.
You were explaining to me agorism.
Agorism, if you'd like.
Agorism?
Yeah, I haven't decided which one's my favorite way to say it yet.
Yeah.
But it's all the fun stuff. Like it's Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and it's arms dealing and sex work and smuggling and like all of the basically anything that you can do to deprive the state of its resources and expose its criminal behaviour by means of civil disobedience as well.
Yeah. Well,
But-
I don't think there's anything wrong with civil disobedience.
Not at all. I think it just has to get smarter.
Yes, and that doesn't mean I'm all for like, rioting and looting and that sort of stuff.
But it's exposing the brutality of the state. So my favourite example of that is way back when Russell Brand was doing the trues.
Yes, I used to love it every day.
Love the trues. When he went offline with that, I got this feeling in my gut. I was like, something's really bad's about to go down.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of giving up. But I'm so glad he's back.
He did it every day for, I
did.
think a year, was it?
Yeah.
Trues?
Yeah,
Love
it was a great show. But in that, I think there was a protest in London, and there was an issue where essentially they were outsourcing a lot of security measures to private security companies, and then the police were being laid off in masses, and or like their pensions were being lessened or taken away. And he's made the point of saying, well, we should be protesting, but the people that should be on the front lines of that protest are, people who are marginalised by the police, whether that's like if you're a person of colour or like you're looking like a common criminal, kind of, lower socioeconomic people. They should be at the front of that protest fighting for the rights of the police, because when that's reported on the news, they have to show footage of the police arresting those people fighting for their rights. And so there's like a kind of cognitive shift there. And that's the kind of action that I want to see more of, is like making people think about it. Like there's another historical example that is kind of cool. And that was because I was reading about it the other day. During World War II, so there was this Rosenstrasse event, and essentially it was like towards the end, so I think 1943, 44, that when a lot of those policies had been put into place by Hitler, they had made certain allowances. So for instance, interracial marriage between German and Jewish people was forbidden, but prior marriages were allowed to still exist, and those Jewish people were allowed to work and remain a part of the community. But towards the end of the war now, that was changed. So I made the decision that, okay, we're actually going to take away we're going to take those Jewish people away, and we're going to send them to the camps. And it was in this town, in this street, so in Berlin, that these German women realised one day that their husbands hadn't come home from work and that they were due to arrive. And by way of just person to person and this kind of like telephone line communication, realised that they had been sent to this centre, which was known that, you'd be there for 2 or 3 days and then you'd be sent to a camp. And so they all just arrived and basically shouted, let our husbands go, we want them home, we need them home. And, in that situation, the state had to proceed really carefully. They could threaten violence. They could say, if you don't move, we're going to open fire, and who dies, dies. But then they couldn't actually do it because their brutality would then be exposed.
Yeah, and that would be their undoing.
How would German fathers and brothers feel about that state if their daughters were being killed by them just for going to defend their family? Like they couldn't do it. So it became, I think, the only instance during World War II where the individuals kind of collectivized and stopped a whole bunch of people.
Do you think that's why they're trying to divide the society, specifically in Australia? You see it like we're being in Western culture, we're being divided constantly. Specifically, like I see it a lot with race. You see it now with The Voice. It's an interesting conversation. We can come back to the medical freedom stuff in a moment, but you've done a bit of. You're actually pretty. You're up to date a bit with the policy behind The Voice.
I've read the bill or whatever. I think and I know I've read more than Anthony Albanese has, from my understanding. Look, I just wanted to. I wanted to understand it because I'm being asked to vote on it. I actually don't feel comfortable with being asked to vote on it. I don't think it's my place at all. Like, I don't have any. I mean, I found out just before COVID actually that I may carry some Indigenous bloodlines in my family, which I think is the case for a lot of Australians, and it's not necessarily something that's known about. But I have no connection to that culture. I was not raised with it, and that's its own thing. But
we don't even know when the referendum is.
Isn't it October? I feel like October 14th was floated.
Has that been
as an idea? I don't know if it's been confirmed.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I don't think it's our place to decide. I mean, what is it? 3 to 4% of Australia are First Nations Australians, and yet 97% have equal weight in this vote. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me, and I'll try and speak on it very literally because I mean, there's a gut feeling I have that there's a bit of spiritual warfare at play here, because I think that it's a bit of a bait and switch, like the trade-off is going to be so much more dire than the alternative, but that's another thing. Yes, sorry.
Well, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you'd think they were just throwing out these things that make no sense. Not just that, everywhere. Specifically to divide and to distract and to keep us bickering amongst ourselves instead of uniting. You talked about that the first time that people united in World War I. Did you say or World War II?
World War II.
World War II.
Look, I think yes, in those lines, I do agree. I do also think, particularly with Indigenous Australia, like I have such a reverence for their law, LORE law,
yes, yep,
and connection to country, and I do believe that this referendum and The Voice serves as a means of severing that in a way. And there is this level of ownership, which is really uncomfortable to talk about, but it feels like that. It's like saying, well, now you're one of us kind of thing. And I'm like, that's not really sovereignty or respecting a culture. It's kind of, and I'm like,
I'm going to, before I make any decisions, I'm going to talk to some of my Indigenous friends, just get their opinions, and the only issue with doing something like that is what information have they been fed, and then it's the same with anything. Like we were talking about medical autonomy before, like, and doctors not lying, just giving the information that they've been told and fed, which doesn't necessarily mean it's correct or true.
Yes, and actually, what's kind of interesting about that is that I watched Lydia Thorpe's speech that she gave at the press club last week, and I think from about 15 minutes, she's just hitting points like on the head, just like,
yeah, okay.
Whoa.
Who was that?
Lydia Thorpe. So I think she's an independent now.
Yeah.
And she is part of the Black Sovereign movement, and what they're referring to as a progressive no. So, there's like people who are voting yes, and also I've, worked alongside the WA Labor Party, and like I've been to conferences and stuff. So like I'm very well aware of their campaigns, and I haven't really felt convinced. It doesn't even feel like the right word. I shouldn't be saying convinced. I should be saying that, you know, it resonates with me or whatever, but it does feel like a convincing, it does feel like a kind of manipulation, emotional manipulation in this way of like, well, you should give this. And haven't you ever had a experience where you felt oppressed by something, and imagine like giving that, like relieving that to other people? It's just, it feels ick. Because it doesn't, there's no substance to it. Yeah. You know, like the part of the apology that is important when, like, regardless of the situation, is when you apologize to someone, you say you're sorry, and then you take that on board and you integrate it and your behavior changes. And like, that's the bit that feels like it's missing. It does feel like this kind of empty promise. But yes, Lydia Thorpe, her speech was hitting a lot of similar language to the conversation we've been having about COVID, which was kind of ironic because she was complaining at one point that the vaccines weren't getting out to remote communities fast enough, but we'll park that one for now. But yeah, she was talking about, you know, that consultation isn't consent, and talking about, I mean, sovereignty is obviously always something that's been associated with Indigenous Australians, but it's it's been kept vague very intentionally. In the bill, there's a Chief Justice or very high court person, and he basically says, well, you know, it should be kept vague, and on issues of this nature, the public should just trust their government. And when I read that, I just was like, I can't take this seriously. They skim over, you know, Peter Dutton's 15 questions that they refused to answer, but some of them were valid questions. Like with this, because I think one thing that's really important to remember is that, and we should probably bring up the question so that I don't get it wrong, but when we're being asked to recognise First Nations people in the Constitution, it's by way of the voice. And what is the voice? The voice is the advisory board. So I don't have a problem with the first part of that question. I think that that's a very important thing to do. But I do have a problem with agreeing to a board that I don't really know what the purpose is, or how it's going to be formed, or who qualifies to be a part of it. I mean, I think that was one of the 15 questions was, are we now, like, by what means are we going to deem Aboriginality? Is that a conversation that we want to have? Yeah. You know, like it's a very tough one. Does my vague connection and family history qualify me, even though I have no experience? As culturally an Indigenous person, would I be able to say, oh well, look, I can tick this box because of my family history, but I have no idea about it, but then I have just as much right? I think like those questions do need to be answered before saying yes or no.
100%. Do you want his list of questions?
I was just curious for the exact wording of the referendum question, because I mean that's the one that we're all being asked.
Yeah, well, that's the one. Will the government clarify the definition of Aboriginality to determine who can serve on the body?
Yeah, I feel like that's a valid question.
Because if you've got,
and not to make comical something that's a very, very serious topic, but you know, are we going to have a whole lot of Elizabeth Warrens running around? Yeah,
it's an interesting one. And,
are you gonna have an episode on it?
Potentially,
because I mean, obviously, a lot of the Indigenous Australians that I speak to are aligned in other movements as well. So, like their answer on it is a no, and it's pretty evident. They don't feel like that they've been consulted. Yeah, they feel like a certain portion of people have been consulted, and they're the ones who are saying yes. Yeah. Okay. And there's a lot of issues with it. Like I'm very much like treaty before voice. Yeah. 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 Okay. Because it does feel like posturing. It does feel like just giving. They're saying that this is. They're saying we don't want to give an empty offer, but then they're giving the emptiest offer that they can and asking us to trust them after. And also,
why would we trust the government?
They've given like Indigenous Australia no reason to trust them historically.
No.
Whether that's by way of like medical experimentation, which like that's an interesting part of Australian history if you ever want to go into it. It's just kind of shocking to me. Again, like I said, starting talking about it, I just don't really feel like it's my place to vote on it. I don't feel comfortable about going into that booth. To be honest, I'm starting to not feel comfortable even talking about it because I'm like, what right do I have?
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. I don't feel I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I don't know what the fuck it is. So I don't, and I've tried looking up what it is. I've tried looking into it a little bit, and I need to talk to someone, preferably in the Indigenous community. He's very well.
Ideally, those are the people, who should be consulted, and probably the only people who should be voting on it, if you ask me.
That's a very good point as well.
I feel like if we're offering, or if we want to maintain like a sovereignty and if we want to maintain sovereignty, those are the only people. Like they're making that choice, because it's theirs to give. I think in a way.
That's a great. That's a very good point. It shouldn't be our fucking choice.
Well, and this is where I think,
they want that? Do they think that's going to serve them? Because I think they do. Any sort of way that we can help establish a better relationship with the Indigenous community and help represent them in better ways is going to be great. Mm-hmm. But as long as it's an actual position that is going to make a change and make a difference and help in those ways, if it's just something for the sake of it to. And then it's going to waste taxpayers' money and blah blah blah.
Oh, it's a disgusting figure to the Australian Electoral Commission. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to manage it.
But we'll move away from it because Okay.
No, it's fair enough. It's a really really tough one, and like I differ from the conservative. No, I think I think that there's not a lot like COVID. There isn't really a place for people that sit in the middle of it. It's like you're either, One Nation about it or Labor about it, and somewhere in the middle there again.
But shouldn't we be like that on almost everything? Shouldn't we be?
We should try to be.
Shouldn't we be entertaining the idea that these guys might have some valid points and these guys might have some valid points, and we can find somewhere in between that's going to be a way forward? Like that should have been the way with COVID. That should have been the way with fucking everything. Even I go back to Buddhism. I'm very heavily into Buddhism. I wouldn't even call myself a Buddhist, but I found Buddhism as a great way of teachings that helped me open my eyes to certain ways. And the biggest thing they push is the middle way. The middle way is always important, and I just don't understand why it goes back to absolutes. Why does everything have to be in absolutes? This is right and that is wrong. No, that's not correct. That's like me. I think Trump, for example, is a great. I thought he was a great president. I also think he's a fucking idiot. So like,
he didn't pardon Assange. That was the biggest betrayal.
100%. So there's things I completely disagree with, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was he didn't want to do that, and there was. Your hands are tied in certain areas. I get the whole idea of politics, but I'm just using him as an example. Yes. Just because I thought he was a good president and a better president than Obama and a better option than Biden doesn't necessarily mean I think he's perfect, because I think he's fucked up in certain ways, and I think so.
He's made a lot of. I mean, we could even argue Operation Warp Speed. Like, what was he thinking? He was critical of vaccines back in 2012.
Yes.
So that was his kind of curtailing to that establishment. I think it comes from a need for safety. I think people need to be absolute because they need to feel that safe, that safe feeling or like assured, because this world has gotten so crazy. And I mean, particularly with obviously the internet and just having that overwhelm of information, I think that in itself has a polarizing effect of like, you have to sit in a camp and there's the people that are in the camp with you. And to comprehend these things or to critically think about all of these things is exhausting. I would imagine that you feel exhausted after the last 4 years of information that you've been receiving, and not just about COVID. I've been thinking about this a lot because I have, and this is kind of a friend of mine said that most people, and I don't say this as like my head's up my own bum and I think I'm special. I say this as like it's actually a bit of a setback, but people think like up and down, and I kind of think this way. And I mix, like everything kind of gets mixed in together. It's very hard for me to speak on one topic without going, oh, but this plays in and this plays in and this plays in too. And
well, I think the first step we could take as a society in general is just make it law that if you're going to profit from the policy or the product, you don't have a say in the regulation of the product or the implementation of the policy.
That's a pretty good one.
Surely, if you're going to make money from selling me a medication, you cannot fund the research and the regulation.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair.
Surely.
I would agree with you on that one.
But that's the case with anything. Surely if you're going to profit from war, you cannot then try and influence policy for a government to go to war. Like these are the things that I think are just very obvious, and I don't think anyone would disagree with this. But no one really would. I guess everyone can see it, but no one does anything about it. Not that we can.
But we can. But I think that's the beauty.
What can we do?
That's the beauty of this narrative and the way that it's played out and how efficiently that system has worked is that we're tired. Like we have to make money to earn a living, to keep our house clean, to feed our children. Like at the end of that, you don't want to be thinking about how am I going to restructure and rebuild society. There does need to be a level of trust, and it has been undermined to such a degree. It's hard to see a way out, and the burden, I guess, is falling on the people in that way. I mean, that's why agorism for me is something that's empowering, because it does take that back. I mean, that counter-economic thing of like homesteading and taking back your kind of agricultural practices and taking your money out of those systems is a way, like you starve it. And the only solution that I see to these structures of power is not to destroy them or bring them down, but is to make them irrelevant. Like that's the way that you need to do it. It's a lot of hard work and it's a slow slog, but it's the only way that I can see forward, and the only light as well, because that's the other thing. When we talk about the destruction of these things, it's pretty depressing. I don't know. I'm happy to go on record and say my mental health suffered a little bit during that period where I wasn't allowed to, or like even so I didn't mask the entire time. I think maybe the last 2 months I just got tired of having the conversation. But to, have people constantly looking at you, or to run into people that maybe aren't really close friends who you feel comfortable having that conversation with. But they're like, well, why are you doing that? And it's just like,
well, I did the same. Do you know what? I initially masked up out of respect for other people. Like not respect for other people, fear of other people. And then once I had seen the data on their own website, on the CDC and the World Health Organization's website, that masks were ineffective and only had a 15% effective rating if you were using the correct mask, not touching them, changing them every 20 minutes, and you were displaying symptoms. I was like, well, I'm not wearing them anymore. So I just used to walk around in the shopping centre and no one said anything.
Oh, really? See, I had a couple. Did you have any run-ins with like security or... I had security, I had police, and I had Transperth guards quite aggressive with me.
So once me and Delby went into Officeworks and they said, oh, where's your mask? And we said, oh, we're exempt. And they said, can you show us your exemption card? We said no and just kept walking.
Oh, that's nice.
So we were just, we weren't assholes.
Yeah, no. You have
I just
to be,
said we had an
exemption
polite. Because I didn't want to go down the conversation. I didn't want to have the argument. I didn't want to go, here's the data. I'm sorry. I don't have symptoms. I'm fine. You're just as much of a danger than I am.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. I just sort of left. I just left it.
I offered that, like, similarly, I just say I have an exemption, and if they ask to see it, I actually did go to the extent of getting a doctor's note because I was tired of having the conversation with people. And that was just a way of nipping it in the bud. The other thing is I have my son with me the majority of the time, and so it's just not very conducive to that. I had one really, really bad experience.
Really?
Mother's Day 2021.
Mother's Day of all days.
Yeah, it was the day before because I had gone. I'd been keeping a low profile, but I'd gone out shopping to get something for my mum, and I was on the way home and getting on a bus to which there were no other passengers, by the way. It was just myself and my son, and I didn't have my mask, obviously, and said, I have an exemption when asked by the driver. And he was pulling out of a station, and as he did that, he stopped the bus and he called over the Transperth guards. And they all boarded. There was 2 of them at first, and I'm sitting there, and my son was 2.5 at the time. Wow. So he's in his pram, and they're saying, well, why you don't have a mask? I said, no, I have an exemption. And I don't think at this point I had gotten the note. And they said, well, what is it? And I said, I don't have to tell you that.
Yeah.
And I have a very valid reason, by the way, for not wanting to wear one.
Yeah.
And they kept pushing and saying, what was the reason? What was the reason? You have to tell me. You have to tell me.
No.
Is it emphysema or whatever? I said, I don't owe you my medical history.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to say it. And they said, well, you need to wear this mask or we're going to take you off the bus. And it kept going, and one of them was really, really aggressive. Another 2 guards got on. So at this point, I'm sitting, in that front section quite low with a pram and a toddler and 4 men who are all wearing masks just like standing over me like this. And I started to cry because it got a little bit overwhelming. And my son said to me, Mummy, just put it on.
Oh.
And I then lost it. And I just went, this is my point. Like, I can't just sit here and not. Yeah, like, how do you, because now he's aware of what's being asked of me. And is he going to watch me put it on, or is he going to watch me stand up for myself? And he watched me put it on because I am getting emotional about it now. But the thing for me was getting him home safe.
Yeah.
And in that situation, I felt like our safety was immediately threatened. So I had to compromise on that. And ironically enough, one of the guards came down, and he was the one who gave me the mask, and he got really low and like away from the cameras, and he said, I just want you to get home safe. He said, put this on. As soon as the bus leaves this station, you take it off. Just get home.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I did that, but physically I was crying so hard I couldn't wear it because it was just like filling with snot and tears. And I took it off.
And now you're displaying the symptoms.
Yeah, I know. But when I got home and I really had to sit with it, that was a massive turning point for me. And I was like, I'm so sick of this shit.
The lack of logic, the complete abandonment of logic through that 2 to 3 year period was astounding.
Yeah.
I would be walking my dog in the middle of a park with no one near me, fucking 100 meters away, like no one near me, and you'd hear people put on a mask. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, I saw someone swimming in the ocean with one.
Fuck off.
No, legitimately, there was a period of time we were staying like kind of Sorrento City Beach area. And we went down to the beach because I was like, oh, this is the one place I could probably get away with not wearing one, like just trying to think of those activities to do. And I saw someone who dove under a wave and like pulled one off of their wrist and was just like, wait, what? Is it not wet now? Like, what's going on? But they wanted to signal to the other people that were there clearly. So,
but to like, I guess there was a slight push for keeping exercise in Australia. There was a slight push, and I'll grant that at least there was we have to allow exercise 30 minutes a day minimum. I'll grant that at least they said that.
Yes.
But they were locking up basketball rings. They were to take away
playgrounds, dude. Like you would have had to deal with that as well, and like going to the playground and having like a swing taped up,
swing
and you're
fucking
just
taped
like,
up.
what the fuck?
What the fuck happened? What the fuck happened?
Because like
What the fuck happened?
I lived in a city for most of my life, and so I rely on being able to walk around and go. Like we love going to the museum, we love going to playgrounds, we love going shopping, walking around, like urban environments. Super into it, which is kind of part of my polarity. Because at one end of the spectrum, I'm like, I want to go homestead and not talk to anyone ever again, and at the other point, I'm like, I like going to the bar and the comedy club. But yeah, that was just wild. This idea that kids couldn't play out in the sunshine.
Yeah, because vitamin D played zero role in fucking COVID-19. Jesus Christ!
Look, I remember when I had it, and I got it last out of our family.
Yeah,
and
how'd you go?
Oh, it was fine. I enjoyed it because the way that it worked out was that my son's father got it first, and he had his like 2 or 3 days before he was due to have our son. And I said, our son got it. Yeah. And overnight was fine. Like he tested positive, had a bit of a fever, slept on me because mums regulate body temperature in that super nice fun way. And then woke up and he was fine. And then
like all kids.
Yes. And then I was feeling okay.
Sorry, I won't go absolutes.
No,
I'm
the majority of children.
Yes, yeah.
And I tested. No, I said, I'll be damned if I'm isolating in this tiny apartment that I'm living in. Like, we need to go. And so we went and stayed with him, and it just worked out that I got to have my feverish few days, like, locked in a bedroom and sharing the parenting responsibilities, which I was very, very grateful for. But yeah, it was like 2 days of feeling hot, and then I was good. I didn't get the cough.
The spicy love.
I'm like, should I? This is like a tinfoil hat moment. I think I actually got it in 2019. I'm one of those people, yeah.
Well, I think we're seeing numbers like earlier, like was it September? As early
in
as
Europe,
September?
I think.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy.
They've shown that it was potentially circulating as early as that. But I got very sick in November of 2019, and like it was very feverish and flu-like symptoms, and fatigued to the point where I couldn't walk from my bedroom to my bathroom and back without stopping on the couch for 20 minutes. Yeah. And I was going, oh, this is a really bad flu. And I'm going, oh, I'm going to get congested. Like I know my body and how I get sick, and I'm going to get congested, and that's going to be par for the course. But then that went away, but then it was replaced by this cough that I just could not shake. Yeah. And to the point where I was struggling to breathe, and that was a bit scary. But yeah, that was about 10 days, and then it went away. And then 2 months later, they were talking about this thing, and I was going, this sounds like something I just had. No, it can't be. Can't be.
But the whole idea that, like, so for what's it, our natural immunity, having had it already and then not being able to.
Yes.
It's what, 20, I think it's, I can't remember. I won't quote it. I'll be called for misinformation. But the last data I read was like 27 times more effective than the vaccine.
I was so desperate to know if I had it, and because like I had that kind of inkling. I was like, oh, did I get this before it all started? I want to know. Like, surely they'll pick up antibodies if I had it. Yeah. I was trying to find somewhere that would take a blood sample or something. I was like, please tell me, but no one would do it. Oddly enough.
Yeah. And people keep saying, like, just let it go, just move on. And
it's really hard when I'm seeing the policies that are still at play and the game that is afoot, and it's really not going anywhere. It's just changing issues.
Did you see recently that the guy in Canada who had a kidney donor available, which I think was his sister, and they still said they wouldn't operate, and he died?
Yeah, who does that serve? By the way,
I don't.
In what capacity does that serve?
But also, just so you know, they're going to harvest his organs and use his organs. So
brilliant!
They can't operate on him, but then they can use his unvaccinated.
His dirty,
organs.
unvaccinated organs are perfectly fine for someone else who has been vaccinated.
The level of logic
He can't be in the same room because he's unvaccinated, but his organs can go into someone's body.
Justin Trudeau, he's a fun
guy. He's a fun guy. I saw, him and his son in their pink shirts at the Barbie movie, signaling away post-divorce, where I'm sure nothing shady happened.
Yeah. Well, fuck. The people like that, like the Barbie movie it's caused a big division. They're like, this is fucking...
I haven't seen it.
I don't care.
I shouldn't. I don't care too either. Yeah. I'm like, I shouldn't judge it, but I had a small interest in seeing it right when it was announced that they were making it. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I wasn't allowed to have Barbies for a portion of my childhood because I was raised by a very strong feminist for a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wasn't allowed to have them. And then one Christmas I woke up, I think I was about 5, and I walked into the lounge room and there was a pile as high as my head and I got everything. I got the sports car and the horse and all of this kind of stuff.
Wow. And
so it was an integral part of my childhood. So I was interested in it from that perspective. I also bought into the whole meme-age of Barbie and Oppenheimer in one day and which order you were going to do it in. I love films, so anything to go out and have that experience, I'm like, cool for it. But then the extent of the media campaign and push to go and see it, and all of the sponsorship deals and like all of the memes, and then I'm seeing this massive press tour beforehand that was so extensive. I thought the movie had been released, and then they were like, oh no, it's still 2 weeks to go. Why?
I don't, and this is the thing that people can think of me what they want about it, but I'm not going to watch it. Not because I don't care about the fucking feminism part of it. Whatever.
I'm full of internalized misogyny. So please, we can have this conversation.
I just don't care. Like I think Margot Robbie is hot as fuck. She's my favourite.
Her in the bathtub in The Big Short.
So good. But I'll watch all this. I'll watch her movies. I love her. Like I said,
she's a great actress.
I'm a fucking man. I have needs. I look at her and I go, fuck yeah, I like her. But I'm not going to go watch a Barbie because I don't give a fuck about it. I haven't gone to see Oppenheimer either, but I'm not going to watch Barbie because I just don't. It's not for me. It's not a movie that's made for me. I'm not going to go. I'm not a fucking male feminist and going to go watch it. Does any guy want to go watch Barbie? Like, I'm sure some guys. I'd go watch it with my daughter if she wanted to go watch it, but that's about it. Like,
yeah,
does it make me a misogynist that I don't want to go watch it?
We probably should go and see it and then talk about it. Is probably the vibe of the thing.
I heard it's great and I heard it's terrible.
I've heard both. I did go and see Oppenheimer.
I heard nothing but incredible things about Oppenheimer. We got our first meh.
Yeah, I'm mehing it.
What was your meh about it? The history?
No, not necessarily. It just I do love Christopher Nolan.
And I do. I love him too. Yeah.
Tenet was great, and I don't know if that was just because that was like the first movie I saw during that COVID period where I was like so starved of a film, and then I was just attached myself to it. Yeah. But I felt like it could have been the last 90 minutes and I would have been cool.
Oh, you didn't need the initial... How long does it go for?
It was 3 hours.
Okay.
And it did take a while to get going. I get that they have there's a lot to set up there.
Character development and whatnot.
And look, I am a massive proponent of equality and that I think men and women are equally atrocious. But it was giving a lot of middle-aged man discovers that his choices have moral consequences and for the first time, and I'm going it's not that that's not interesting enough to me, or it's not enough to just be like, oh yes, he worked this hard and did this and was given these choices to make. It's not enough to just go, and then he had trouble with them. I'm like, I really want to delve into the psychology of that choice for him. And I felt like you have to pick one or the other. You can't do kind of exposition of events and this is how it all happened. and that. You have to choose one or the other, and I just felt like it wasn't really doing that.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. It's his visually, it's stunning, and
He's incredible. Like the way he.
his audio, like the scores for his films, I just love.
I
you use Interstellar a lot. Is that what
Interstellar.
you see? Look,
Well, Interstellar is incredible.
Showing my fandom.
It could be one of my favourite movies of all time.
Sorry.
I just love, because I'm a big space fan. I'm a big. I love that sort of.
You
know,
also have a daughter.
I also
so
have a
that's
daughter
big
who
part of it
fucking
too.
tugged on some
Yeah.
strings hard. But I liked the fifth dimensional creatures because I'm big into the 5D sort of stuff. I'm big into the the future humans helping themselves. I love that whole.
That's kind of cool.
And it took me another 2 or 3 times watching it, and then me and Delby watched it after we had an astrophysicist on, and
I vaguely
rewatched
remember
it
that
together. Very interesting episode. It was incredible, mind blowing. But we both watched it at the same time, and we were like texting each other things we were picking up on.
I love it when you do
once
that.
we'd done
Yeah.
something, and I'd never done that before, and it was actually quite cool to do. But then we got to the end and realized that the love was the unquantifiable energy of the movie, and that's the end point in which love brought his daughter and him back together. And love was unquantifiable. It was this whole thing about the movie ended up being less about science and more, well, potentially that love is a quantifiable measurement of or energy that could be measured, but we just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I loved, pardon the pun, loved that.
I feel like this conversation is being steered because we keep kind of dancing around this theme that I've been thinking a lot about.
Okay.
And that is kind of this idea of the millennial malady. That's what I call it. And like where we find ourselves society-wise.
Yes.
And the problems that we're facing. Like all of these things that we've been talking about, my thing is like, what is it? Like what is preventing us from being respectful to each other? What is preventing us from having these conversations? And like I wrote a 3,500 word, what I call art ho rants at cloud, because it just felt like me ranting and raving about all these things. And the idea, it was especially because in another section of my life, an artist in multiple ways. I love to paint, I love to write, I love to perform. And I feel ripped off because of the way that community is existing right now, and the ideas that are being pushed down and not heard, and then the ones that are being elevated. And
Elevated by mainstream or
funding, mainstream culture. There are works that are more acceptable, or like there's works that are more likely to be picked because they fit a certain set of criteria. And that's not what art has ever been for me. It's challenging that status quo. It's evoking a catharsis in your audience that forces them to think about things differently, or equally to, share an experience and connect with them on that level as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, I feel like it's so milquetoast now. And like I go and see, I've got my own issues with Fringe, I suppose, like just in regards to the content that's put and pushed to the front.
I think we all do.
We all do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's super milquetoast and not helping us. And I've always seen art as something that propels us forward and we evolve from it. And so I was writing about that and what was kind of killing it, I suppose, and these ideas of love and beauty being one that was super important in that, because it's an inherent quality. And it's unquantifiable. Like why? I sometimes will be walking down the street and I'll see a building in the sunshine the right way, and I'm struck by it.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you why.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah.
And I feel...
You do get those moments. You can be on a walk around the lake, or you can be...
Yeah.
I could be having a coffee at the right time of the day.
You know, my favourite one, which can get you into a bit of trouble, is when you are like sitting on a train or you're just out and about and you see a person who is just so embodied as themselves. And it doesn't actually matter what they look like. There's just a way that they walk. And that could be someone who has been completely beaten down by life, but they are just who they are. And you go, holy crap, that's like, because you know conventionally you're attracted to certain physical attributes, right? And then you see someone who does not fit that description at all, and you haven't even spoken a word to them, and you go, like, you're just stunning. And then they look at you and they're like, why are you looking at me funny? But it is this thing, and I feel like we're being asked to ignore that feeling, and we're being told those, like, that attractive is what equals beauty. The thing that I kind of discovered, I suppose, and read a bit about as well, is it does seem to be this separation of divine being or God or creator or whatever you want to call it, like that sense of divinity and that presence in things. Is being severed from our culture, and that's the part of our problem. And I think that's also that thing with love. Like, I'm doing a big roundabout thing, but when I circle back to that, I don't want to use that phrase.
Circle back, you sound like Jen Psaki.
When I return to the thought,
I'll just circle back to you on that later.
I hate it.
Yeah,
it was so viral though. So when I kind of come back to that thought of the millennial malady and like what our problem, because I feel like our generation is such a massive part of it, and I'm like, what's different about us that we are so intolerant of each other and that we're so aggressive to people who have different thoughts than us? It seems to be a lack of love, and it seems to be a lack of trust. And I think it's a lack of love and trust for ourselves that is causing that. Yeah, certainly. We're very hypercritical of ourselves. I catch myself at times, and I've caught myself, I still do, looking at my body, going, you can be better. You can fix this. This is bullshit. Yes.
Doesn't change.
I'm not laughing at that. That's a horrible thought to have.
No, it's fine. But it doesn't change the person I am.
No.
Inside. Physically, I'd like to be in the best condition I can. Not for look. Vanity, I won't pretend vanity doesn't play a role in it because it serves my ego. But it also
it also manifests a confidence. If you're struggling to love the internal person, but you like the way that you look, and you're taking care, and that comes from taking care of yourself. That's also not you with a ironically picture of Ryan Gosling taped to the mirror, going, I have to look like that. That's you just going, okay, I'm putting the most care in.
But I did have that, not Ryan Gosling, but I did have that vision of like, I need to be perfect. I need to be sculpted.
Yeah,
I don't need to be that. I understand that a physical representation of my health will, it's a consequence of me being healthier and feeling better. I get it. But I would judge myself. I'd look at myself with a bloated belly, going through one of the hardest situations of my life, going through a divorce, in isolation, through COVID, nearly losing my job. All of these fucking pressures coming on me, specifically the fact that if I lost everything, my house, blah, 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 I'm also going to lose my daughter or the ability to look after my daughter. All of that came back to I would just judge myself on everything. Just fucking, just fix it. Just go back to, I got to a point where I was like, well, if your business is destroyed because of this, you can always get back to sheet metal.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't because you had to be vaccinated to be in the construction industry. So there were so many things happening to me. So I took health as my pivot point. I was like, right, fucking take control of that. If you can take control of that, that's one thing, and then you can just that's one less thing to worry about. That's how I pictured it. But I still did it with vanity and ego. I still did it with that. And I was judging myself the whole time. I've now let go of that. Fortunately, I guess I'm in good health now. I'm running and I'm eating better and whatnot. So as a byproduct, I look better, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't make me a more beautiful person. My personality and the way I think and my empathy and gratitude and kindness to others probably makes me a better person.
Kindness is such an important word as well, because I think that's a part of this kind of in this cultural dialogue we're in, and kindness is different to niceness.
Yes.
Kindness doesn't always feel good, but it's the place that it comes from. And maybe that plays into the lack of trust in a way, is that people are so consumed with being nice and appearing good.
Yes.
That, they forego kindness for niceness just to remain accepted or to be perceived as good.
Well,
don't be so. I don't see. I think
we were doing it before.
We were doing it before.
Sitting here, you're looking at yourself in the screen over there.
Yeah, so I've aged a lot recently and I've become very aware of it. And so I'm going, how's this lighting affecting
Of course,
affecting
we'd
that?
like to look good. I guess that's our ego. And for me, it's almost like if you present yourself well, it's a reflection upon you as well. You know, like your physical appearance.
Physicality shouldn't come into beauty at all. I think that's attraction or attractive elements, and there's a biological function for that. Like that's, you can kind of palm it off to the side, but I think the way that attraction is being weaponized, too strong of a word, but used to and in place of what beauty is forcing us to be more severed from those concepts. And so this kind of idea of having connection to the divine, to spirit, whatever you want to call it, that magical thing in humanity that we all recognize the feeling of immediately.
That unquantifiable feeling. To force that separateness is stalling the change that you and I want to see. Yes.
I can't speak for other people, but it definitely feels like it's playing a massive part, because we are being forced to categorize and expand what is beautiful or like attractive to just include everything.
Well, that doesn't necessarily, yes, correct. But that also, this war on being healthy and fit and going to the gym is it's a misogynistic thing, or you must like Andrew Tate if you go to the gym and, you know, all that sort of stuff. I don't like that side of things. I don't like this demonization. I read an article the other day that going to the gym is, it's a showing of white supremacy. I saw that headline. I didn't bother reading the article. It's almost frustrating seeing that. I seen an article title the other day, and I didn't even want to fucking go near it and read it. That why getting up early has ties to white supremacy. Oh. What the fuck? I get up early so I can get a lot more done in my day.
What about all the monks?
Oh, yeah.
Don't come for the monks.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's insane. That's a part of it. I mean,
but it dilutes real problems.
It does dilute real problems, and
suggesting working out is a bad thing, or suggesting that that getting up early is a trait of white supremacy. It makes you just disregard anything because you start going, this is ridiculous. And then when someone brings up something very real about white supremacy, you go, I don't want to hear it. It dilutes the very real problems that we see in the world. I see that with everything. Feminism. When you go down toxic feminism, like really extreme feminism, it dilutes the real problem of the toiling and the suffering that women have suffered for fucking decades.
It's super embarrassing. I mean, I was raised by a single mum and was quite feminist in my thinking as a kid. I mean, but also very blessed because I just went, oh, well, this is where we've come from and there's no reason that I can't succeed because I'm a girl.
Yeah.
And that was about the extent of it. I've obviously been, not obviously, but, you know, we know that like sexual harassment is very common but like equally, I guess, and, you know, it's a little less safe for me to walk home alone at night than it may be for you for different reasons too. You're probably more likely to get like punched in the face just walking through Northbridge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good
Like
point. Yeah.
it's a different way. But it wasn't something that was ever I felt like I had to hold on to in my adulthood. It was just like, I know that I don't deserve less and I'm going after it. But the way that it's evolved, I just don't resonate with it at all anymore. I suppose I would maybe only consider myself a more radical feminist in that I do see there's a massive issue with women and the medical industrial complex. And if you want to talk about
I do. Go. You know, I always do.
But just in terms of the control of our system, so just hormonally, like we've put on birth control at 15 because like we become sexually active. I mean, speaking very generally here, of course, and then you're on that for a certain amount of time, and then you're getting, like, you decide you have a baby, and then you're poked and prodded and pushed into all of these maybe not so necessary procedures. And I mean, even
suggesting that birth control or women don't need to be on birth control because of the very real side effects and issues that can be caused by it, that's now considered like an anti-feminist movement. Like, that's ridiculous.
I don't understand, with all of the evidence that exists, that there could be a question that there is a targeted attack on the oppression of the female hormonal system. Yeah. Like, to keep it as dysregulated and dysfunctional as possible does seem to be the goal, and to empower women to take control of that for themselves. Like,
you think it's malicious?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah.
By who? It's all right.
The globalist class.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think that. Okay, so I suppose this is like an overarching thing of like I say, unity consciousness. You would be familiar with, of course.
Yeah,
yes,
of course, yeah.
And like within that, we kind of have this polarity of like masculine and feminine, and it's all like circulating all the time.
Yeah, divine sort of balance.
Yeah, and we do need that balance. As Earth exists in this 3D form right now, it is incredibly unbalanced. I do think that there seems to be a suppression of female energy and
divinity.
Those qualities of nurturing and compassion.
Super important for any child's development.
But I believe that it's kind of being suppressed on a societal level as well, because I mean that like those things exist within you too. It's
yes, of course.
I'm not speaking about physical femininity or masculinity.
In absolutes.
Yeah, but there does seem to be a suppression of that energy that has manifested in this completely toxic expression from women now. And yeah, I think that that's a massive part of the problem. I think that it's only going to be kind of solved by us taking back control of those things. But a huge, huge part of it is the female hormonal system and that being balanced. We are not designed, like women are not designed to work as men do every day because we have a system that fluctuates. We have a literal cycle.
Yeah.
And when you tap into that when you heal that through food and movement and whatever other means you do, you recognize it. Like, I recognize my work patterns now so much better, and I'm so much more productive because I do. And
that's, you're not suggesting that women aren't career orientated or have goals in life.
yeah, do whatever you want.
But that's what someone would argue. Oh, you're saying that women shouldn't do this and blah blah blah. That's what someone would argue.
But like if you're arguing that, then I'm arguing, well, why are you complying to a system that was designed by men for men to flourish in? Why are you not asserting like rules for yourself that work the best for you? I suppose it's like, if you want to conform to that kind of corporate, go for it. Go for it. But if we're talking about women's rights, I have just as much entitlement as a woman to say no. I'm not going to comply to that, and I'm going to work differently. The whole cycle thing, which I'm sure how many of your listeners are men?
14% of our listeners are women.
Oh, cool. So you guys are all enthralled by this conversation.
No, I think that you'd be surprised, because the people who listen to our stuff, they're not men's men, like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm a bloke sort of thing. They're very open and want to have these conversations and dialogues. They're not fuckhead Aussie blokes like you'd expect. It's the 85% of men that really want to learn and are interested in the pros and cons of both sides of masculine and feminine. I'm
not one to dish out medical advice, and I have no right to do so. But if you have a partner and she's a female and you see some kind of struggle there in carrying it all, because that's the other thing, is that there is a slight double standard which is completely enforced by modern feminism of women can have it all. We probably shouldn't. It's too much for one person.
Yeah.
And I would say if you see your partner struggling with that, or you're struggling with that, and you are on birth control, maybe try looking at some alternatives and really take a minute to just take stock of where you're at and how your body works. There is so much nutritionally, which is where I really nerd out, because I love talking about food and what different foods give you.
Yeah.
It's where it's fun. Like that we're little beings on this planet, and we interact with the other plants and beings on this planet to function in this way. So
I always feel like food is where everyone's awakening begins. They realise they've been lied to about their diets. They realise they've been fed these lies that cereal is good for you, or you need breakfast and blah, blah, blah. They go, oh, fuck, I thought that was, and that's that trigger. Yeah. I always find that, for me, it definitely was, and I see it everywhere. Maybe I see it because that's what happened to me, but food was my trigger. Realising food and medication were just, these ones were just forced on you as lies. And it made me dig deeper. It made me look into it and go, what the fuck? I didn't realise that was in this.
Because of my son, I was looking into Weston A. Price. I don't know if you've come across it.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Beautiful. So my baby is a WAP baby, Weston A. Price, not the other one.
Yep.
But yeah, that was kind of the starting of that journey for me, and making sure that he had the best first years and really built up that nutritional store.
Because the book written...
Nourishing Traditions is the one for children.
Okay, so the main part I remember, and I haven't read this book, but I know of one of his books, the one about that's...
The dental health?
The dental health.
Yes.
And just by the Western diet...
Yeah, it's too soft.
Pardon the pun, because who wrote it, but it's too soft. Our teeth and our jaw structure changes.
And you can tell someone who's nutritionally deficient by looking at their face.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's probably what happened to me when I went vegetarian. I went vegetarian for 6 years and initially had incredible results. Incredible.
Yeah, because your body was feeding off its own.
I was also consciously
I guess.
choosing what I was eating. I
Yeah.
wasn't a fuckhead vegetarian. I didn't go and eat fucking Incrediburgers and all that bullshit. I ate real food.
I was
And
a fuckhead vegan.
were you?
For 18 months, yes.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, of course. So I was I ate clean. And
Yes.
generally, and I'm not, again, nothing in absolutes. Probably 80 to 90% really good food.
Were you big on cheese and stuff? Were you like, as long as it wasn't meat, or?
Yeah, just avoided meat.
Yeah.
And it was a conscious decision because of medical issues that were caused through pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Go figure. But I had incredible results. And then after about 3 to 4 years, I started to notice little differences. Even my face, I can look at differences in my face, not just aging. I can look at differences in my face, and they're starting to return. It's starting to get better. These lights aren't good for me because there's some above. But the hollowed out, sunken eyes, dark eyes specifically, which they're still there a little bit, but they're getting better with the addition of meat. There was a lot of issues that came from vegetarianism after a while, because you have that initial like you've rid yourself of all the bullshit you were eating, and then two, I got lazy towards the end, and I would go get some chips or crackers or fucking something like that, especially when I was going through the divorce and had all that sort of stuff going on.
Oh,
you touched on it before. Well, life's so fucking busy. We're doing this and that. And we're just trying to get by. And then by the end of the day, you're like, I can't be fucked. And I'll go get an Incrediburger or some bullshit, And so that therein lies the issue. And that just inflamed things. But I found a big problem with that after about 3-4 years. I started noticing issues. And the incredible feeling that I initially had gone. But again, I'm nothing in absolutes. I've done carnivore. I loved it.
Me too.
I did enjoy it. I will do it from time to time. It'll be something for me that I'll do 2 to 3 times a year for 3 to 4 weeks.
Yep.
That'll do. I'll do fasting for 4 or 5 days, 2 to 3 times a year. Nothing in absolutes. I'll just be like, it's a regular sort of thing. But
listening to your body is super underrated.
100%.
So underrated. And even like listening to it and then feeling guilt associated with listening to it because it doesn't conform with like an idea of. So I was vegan.
Yay.
I was
for ethically or for health.
Yeah.
Wow. Game changers?
I went through a period. Okay, this is how fun I was and what a change I've had. I went through a breakup when I was living in Melbourne. So I was living in Melbourne. I had a Kundalini. No. Yeah, I had a Kundalini yoga studio around the corner from my house.
Oh,
I did. No, I didn't have it personally. Okay. I attended, but it was like right next to my house. So I was going every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day. I was a vegan, yogi,
oh my Lord,
celibate, and sober.
You sound like a terrible person.
Girl, living in Melbourne. I was like, I can't believe that I didn't leave with more friends because I was completely insufferable.
I do apologise to any listeners that are in that sort of world, but fucking sort your shit out.
No, sort your shit out. But if it works for you, that's great.
Of course,
if you're doing
it
for reasons for yourself, and there's no expectations that you're putting or that you feel like you need to meet, or you're doing it for signaling. If you are doing it for signaling, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. That's a weird vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was doing all of these things, and I've never been so sick in my life.
Wow.
I've never, ever been so sick in my life. And I started having panic attacks.
Yeah.
I started having insane levels of paranoia. I thought that, you get those like near Earth object alerts and stuff. I, at one point, thought because some prophet in South America had said that there was going to be a contact with Earth, that I was like, we were going to all die from implosion. So, I went from being incredibly unhealthy in that regard, but then I switched extremes, and like I was little claim to fame. I was messaging with Michaela Peterson back
wow.
when she was like not as well known, because her and I had babies around the same time, and a little bit prior to that, and then I had gone into carnivore kind of half-assed, and then I revisited it, and it's great for periods of time, but I think that at any point, like you said, nothing in absolutes, it becomes an ideology, and you put that ahead of your health. Like, I mean, that's probably my biggest issue with vegan activism, for instance, is like I don't really buy the activism on this kind of like ethical argument, because it's not.
I think they.
It just clashes with my principle, because it's directed at the consumer and the individual. It's not as directed at the institutions. Like, because I had an experience with is it DXE? Like the ones that do the anonymous, like Guy Fawkes mask with the screen protesting in the city. And it was around the time of rallies. It was like 2021. And I said, well, how do you feel about the agricultural industry using 1 million eggs a day to cultivate flu shots? I said, because that's something that I can get behind.
Yeah.
In your activism, and this is where like we need to start working together. We need to be smarter about this. Yeah. And the person that I spoke to, who I think was the leader of that group at least, basically said, we don't want to get too political. And I went, but you're more than happy to stand here in the street and yell at people, or like get into quite aggressive, because I mean, it's never like they come up to you and say, hey, watch this documentary, and you go, oh, maybe I will. They're like, oh, but you're murdering animals and it's a Holocaust, which I...
Yeah, so Tash, and we've had her on the podcast, and
She never has an argument that's based in health, though.
No, of course not.
And she
doesn't.
references the China study, which we know has had a whole lot of holes poked into it.
Yeah, of course. So Tash, I really like Tash. We get along with her. When she came on, she's actually a very good girl, really good person. She does go with that form of activism. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do like that
don't at all.
I do like that her underlying push is, like you just said, not the consumer, but she wants to affect the suppliers. She just feels that her method is to change the consumer's thoughts so it does affect the suppliers. I don't think that works.
Well, she's using,
I know.
Ironically, in the carrot and stick method, of which a donkey is usually in the middle, her stick doesn't seem to be working or resonating with anyone. Like the issue I've had with listening to her speak, and I have a few times, is like, again, I do not want to infringe on her right to live her life the way that she wants to live it. Yeah. Like, go for it. Yeah. And all power to her, because it seems like she seems quite successful.
She's quite passionate about it, yeah.
But it's the imposing of her moral code on other people that I have the problem with. Yeah. And it's like, if she were sitting here and said to me, well, you're murdering babies and animals, like, are you okay with that? Yes, I am. And that's a difference between you and I, and it's not comfortable for me to say. Yeah. But I recognize it as a reality of my life as a human being on this planet. And we just see that differently. But I don't see the benefit in guilting people for their food choices. Especially, I also find it quite dangerous to suggest that just because that diet works for some people, it works for everyone. Like I said, you know, I was not a good vegan in terms of I was just eating what I could. I wasn't really making sure that I was hitting all of my macros and that kind of thing. I've also just anecdotally noticed that it does seem to work better for people who are really physically active. Like the people who are vegan and who are weight training and stuff seem to thrive. It's because of a lot of
carbs. There's a lot of carbs, and the carbs for extreme exercise are pretty important.
Well, they seem to look. I don't know anything about that, but they just seem to look healthier than, say, people who don't do that. So, you know, all the power to those people. But like, kind of going back to that thing of female hormonal health, there are, and brain health, there are things that you can't get from anything other than animal sources, and to the levels that you need them through a vegan diet. And I'm someone who doesn't really believe in supplementation as something.
Most of it just gets
to be every day. Yeah, it's not as bioavailable.
Yeah.
It's not reliable. You need to be getting those things from food sources, and like particularly organ meats and stuff.
I think one thing everyone could agree on is that factory farming and the conditions 100%. In which the animals are put through and live through is disgusting in some areas. Not all of them, but again,
a lot of them, like that whole pig gassing thing is gross. I don't eat a lot of pork for that reason. Like it's very, if I'm out and about and there's bacon on it, I mean, I grew up with like a Polish great grandmother who made way too many roast porks, and there was like way too many kind of hairs occasionally on them, and you just be like, so I stay clear from it. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, a thing that I've kind of been living by recently is like soft on people, hard on systems. And so with kind of the agricultural farming, like I would love to see a return to regenerative pastures and that kind of thing.
100%.
But yeah, I've got it in me to kill an animal.
Yeah.
Is that a cool thing to say?
I think, no. We talked about it last week, and I think that's the thing. Like, people are so detached from the animal itself and the process in which it does lose its life and conditions it lives in. Some people are like, "Oh, I don't give a fuck." Well, you're a fucking cunt if you don't give a fuck about their living conditions and how they're killed and tortured. But
also, if you want to have the more spiritual, sorry to interrupt you, but like if you want to have the more spiritual conversation of energy, and like we know that human beings don't function very well or are very healthy when they're anxious and afraid and all of those things. Why would animals be any different? Yeah. I don't necessarily want to be eating the flesh of animals that are living like that. You can visibly see the difference in meat that you're getting from your friend's farm than what you're getting from a supermarket.
Yeah, you're wanting to see the perfect example. Get eggs that are,
Oh God, yeah.
If you raise your own chickens and give them veggies and scraps and all that, and then you get them from the shops, the yolk, just the yolk, it's like almost an orange, like a deep colour in the pasture raised and your family raised. And then you go to the shops and it's like pale yellow, and the taste, it's creamier, it's better, it's my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, they've got their own chickens, and when I have them, the difference. Yeah, and you can feel the difference. It's healthier, it's better for you. So so I think that's the one thing that everyone can agree on, is that like the living conditions and we want healthier, the best food that we can possibly have.
Yeah, I just
have an appreciation for the fact that this animal has lost its life. I'm completely fine with showing a bit of gratitude for that.
I think there just also needs to be a balance of like, your health shouldn't be sacrificed for appearing a certain way socially. And like, I've got not a lot of friends anymore, but like issues with thinning hair and delayed cycles or absent cycles that were just going, what could it be? I take all these supplements and I do this and I do that, and it is the way it is, and I'm so sick, and I'm like, I'm sick of seeing people sick and not being empowered to help themselves, and that's a whole conversation in itself.
We'll see, and we can sort of we've been going for a bit, so we'll get close to finishing. But
I will talk for as long as possible. I'm a little nervous to hear it back.
No, you've been
listener. This is my first long format conversation that's been recorded.
You've been very good, and this has been good because I very rarely do one-on-ones. But the one thing I did want to just sort of at least touch on, because
of course
it's children is what you focus on.
You want me to talk about my work?
A little bit.
It's interesting.
Like, because obviously we talk about we're just talking about animals and their lack of sovereignty, I guess, or like choice in the matter. But children have a choice in the matter of their health. You know, like if you see this sounds bad, but like, you know, a child's health is at when they're at their youth is totally dependent on the parents.
Yes.
So if I see an obese child, I'll get hate for this, but it's almost a form of child abuse. This is their parents doing. I look when I drive home or drive around and I see the line at the McDonald's drive-through. I understand we're upset, we're under the pump, where life's busy, but that line is ridiculous. It
With
upsets.
the special, what is it, like genetically modified breeded potato to be a certain length and all these things.
And if that's a consistent thing that you're doing with your child, it's not great.
No, it's destroying humanity essentially, because it's something that degenerates every generation. Yes, so my medical freedom advocacy comes by way of an organisation named Children's Health Defence. Did we say that? I can't even remember now.
I don't think we mentioned it, no. I didn't know if we were allowed to or what you wanted to do.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. So let's say this is that portion of the conversation going forward. This is the professional part. Everything expressed before was my own opinion and my own opinion only.
Yes.
So I sit on the board of directors for the Australian chapter, and I am the national chapter coordinator. And it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s non-for-profit. So originally it was started, I want to say like 2002. Because it was the Mercury project prior. So so it was really focusing on the presence of mercury in vaccines. And obviously, I guess I'm going to assume that a lot of your listeners are also Rogan listeners and may or may not have listened to that interview.
I think almost all of them would have, yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't, please do. It's super interesting. But basically the short version of it was that RFK Jr. was doing the work with water and the presence of mercury in the water and then was basically followed around by a group of mums saying, hey, you're worried about the mercury in the water, check out the mercury in these vaccines, you know. And it was really them who pushed him into that line of work. And then Children's Health Defence came around as a kind of broader organisation. So it focuses on these pillars, we refer to them as, but we've got big pharma, and then we have big agriculture, and we have big energy and chemical, and I guess COVID's kind of come up as the other one. But and big tech as well, because we recognise the technology and how it's having an effect on our children. So any issue that affects our children's health or is contributing to childhood epidemics is something that we focus on. Obviously, vaccines is kind of the big part of that.
Yeah, and when it comes to fluoridation of the water,
yes,
it's going into our stomach. It's a toxin. I recognise it's probably good for our teeth, and it's said to be good for our teeth. I don't know what the studies suggest, but it's good for our teeth. Yeah. But it's not good for us.
Hard food is also good for your teeth.
Yes. But why we...
Absence of vegetable oils, also good for your teeth.
Yeah. But that's
absence of sugar, yeah.
But that's mass not vaccination, that's mass...
you don't want to call it poisoning, but you kind of can allude to it. It's a procedure. It's kind of like a submissive medical procedure medical procedure that we're all taking part in if you're drinking tap water. Yeah,
and it was used by the Nazis to subdue the Jews so they wouldn't rebel as much. I know on a much more vicious dosage, but it's still a toxin that we're putting in our body that we're drinking just because it passes past our teeth. I don't understand why there isn't at least a little bit of looking into this.
Yeah, there is. There is. It's just obviously, as you're aware, those people are quite heavily censored.
Why? Because there doesn't seem to be, for me, a beneficiary of fluoridation of the water, except for potentially, does it cause more issues that then are medicated by big pharmaceuticals? Have I hit the nail on the head?
It's a really good thing to follow the money.
Yeah.
And the solution costs those people money, and it costs them time, and it costs them effort. And those are things that they're not really interested in giving up to you because it doesn't benefit them personally.
Because we did allude to the fact that, yes, there is you can see the improvement in dental health when the introduction of fluoride to the water was introduced. But there's also a massive push for dental hygiene and hygiene in general. So that's not, and just cleaner water, cleaner everything. So
yes,
we haven't. You're completely disregarding that as an improvement as well.
Yeah, it's this thing of it's really hard to not find the malicious reasoning because the rest of it just doesn't really make sense.
Like if you went down the tinfoil hat version
well,
of
if you
it,
go down the info wars, it is the
the
calcification of the pineal gland, and I think there seems to be a vested interest in keeping the general population as compliant as possible. Clearly,
yeah.
If the last few years have shown us anything, and like I said, people are tired and they don't want to look into it. There's a few people who really push themselves and can't really see outside of it either. It's really hard having conversations with some of the more learned people in this movement because they're so hyper-focused on those issues, and they can go so in-depth into the numbers and pull everything.
Is there a movement to get it out of our waters?
There's a few smaller organisations and mums groups. I mean, it's the
Effective
same.
though?
It's not super, and that's kind of, I guess, where we come in as like a umbrella organisation, because we have, the name and the reputation. Children's Health Defence really take their time with the information and are consistently putting forward evidence-based
But if you're to Google your organisation, it would come up with it says on Wikipedia, actually, when I even had a look. It says they're known for their misinformation about vaccinations and fluoridation of the water.
Yes, but we won't. It's not like you go onto the website then and read articles and it says vaccines cause autism and believe us. There's it's all referenced and it expands on those points and it asks questions. Children's Health Defence exists to ask questions. We've been presented with the problem of our children are sicker, like more than 50% of them are affected with a chronic health condition, and quite a large portion of that are affected with 2 or more.
And going back to correlation doesn't equal causation, what is the explanation for why autism and chronic illness has increased at the same rate that our vaccinations have increased? What's the explanation given? Is there an explanation, or did they just say, no, you're wrong?
What's whose explanation? Our explanation or the
narrative? What's the narrative? What is the narrative explanation to explain why autism and chronic illness has increased as our vaccination
that we're getting better at recognising it, and that there are various environmental and genetic factors at play. That's about as detailed as you'll get. Obviously, that varies dependent on the person and when they're seeking out medical. Obviously, if I were to go to the doctor and my child had an issue, they would be able to zone in more on that. But generally speaking, that's kind of the explanation that's given, and then you're not allowed to ask questions about that.
Why are we not allowed to ask questions? Why are we just willing to accept that data that is not even science? It's just I'm pretty sure we just recognize it more. That's not an answer.
And it's also, I mean, this is where I'll probably come under fire, because I don't talk about this specifically with a lot of my friends either, because it is a very touchy subject. Because autism means something different now than it did when I was growing up.
Yes.
And neurodivergency means something different, or wasn't even a word when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I have to make it very clear to people that when I'm speaking on autism and developmental delays in families that we're working with, the majority are at a severity where they are not able to care for themselves, or they can basically care for themselves, but it wouldn't be advisable for them to live independently, or it's not possible for them to have a job and sustain themselves independently. I'm not speaking about eccentricities or uncomfortable situations or like however that manifests in yourself. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who really, really need assistance and families who are struggling because they're not being heard. Now,
are you suggesting that these are not all? You would, again, nothing in absolutes.
No.
But you're suggesting that the increase in vaccinations has caused an increase in these sorts of illnesses, not necessarily directly resulting in everyone having it, and that doesn't mean everyone has autism because of.
No, and this is kind of, I guess this is a bigger moment for me personally, because this is me going on record publicly and saying that. But yes, I do think that there is a correlation between those two things.
Wow.
And
because you will receive pushback, I will receive pushback for having you on to say that.
Mm-hmm.
These sorts of conversations need to happen, because if you were to voice your concerns, someone could then say, well, this is incorrect because of this, and then you could come back to them. But these conversations don't happen, which is why I'm quite willing to have these conversations.
I really appreciate it too. I think I need to say that I'm not sitting here and saying that every person who's been affected with autism or has autism, or however they choose to identify that, it's because of vaccines.
Yeah, of course.
I would never sit here and say that.
But that doesn't mean that it's not happening.
It doesn't mean that it's not, and it doesn't mean that there's not a risk associated. And the only reason I can sit here and say that so certainly is because it has not been allowed to be investigated in a way that is fair. The studies that do exist to debunk the autism vaccine link are a little bit sus in terms of their
because it 100% does happen.
Integrity.
Yeah.
It 100% does happen. And also, in this age of lived experience, why are you asking me to deny? It's incredibly anti-feminist, actually, of you to ask me to deny these mothers' experiences.
Yeah.
There are too many women on this planet who have a baby who is developing as what we consider normal or the average, who then take their child to a health appointment and return, and that child is different. That child has lost an ability. That child is not as socially responsive.
I know someone firsthand whose daughter, 100% got autism from the vaccine. They've got payouts and everything. It's been
officially recognised.
Officially recognised. It's a real thing. So that's not a thing. So it's not a conspiracy theory that these things do sometimes.
Well, the vaccine court wouldn't exist if they didn't happen.
Exactly.
Let's say that as an example.
So to completely write it off, this is probably going to be the name of the episode, Nothing in Absolutes. But nothing in the absolutes does it. And again, I'm not suggesting that everyone gets autism from vaccines, nor am I suggesting the opposite.
Yeah.
But to completely write it off and say we don't need to have a look into this potential correlation, because there is a potential correlation, because the spike happens at the same time as the introduction of more vaccinations. So we'll at least look into it. And you're suggesting that they weren't fair or there was no integrity in those.
Well, it's just questionable the way that. And I think we all understand that a little bit better after COVID as well.
Yes.
That the way that those studies are structured, I
couldn't believe that the data was supplied for the safety and effectiveness of the COVID vaccination was supplied by Pfizer.
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't understand that was a thing. I thought that would have to be independently tested.
Was it Pfizer and Moderna who had the early one? Because I remember it was like, I was at the end of 2020 and I read that I think 15 people had a adverse reaction that prevented them from completing daily activities required for daily life by themselves. And I was going, that's too many people for that to happen in that contingent. We wouldn't have seen
that data unless Pfizer was sued through the Freedom of Information Act to release that data. Otherwise, they were going to hold it over for 75 years.
Yeah, that's such a. It's. I mean, well, that's that. When I heard that, but when I heard that, I always like was ringing in my ears of like Epstein and who's the British guy, Jeremy or Jeff, like the. He had like the kids show.
Oh, Cavill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Savile. Jimmy Savile. Henry Cavill,
Henry
Superman.
Cavill. Yeah, I was watching the Witcher last night. Sorry, Cavill. I like the Witcher. Sorry.
It just reminded me of that. I'm like, that's where they're on par with. Like, we're not allowed to find that information out for that long.
Don't look here. Yeah.
It's I mean, even the Wakefield paper that suggested that there was a correlation between autism and gastro-like illnesses.
Yeah.
Was, published for a decade before it was retracted. And I believe in the last paragraph of that study, it says more investigation is required. There was no assertion that this is exactly the way things are and we're making this certainty. We're just saying we're noticing a pattern and we want to follow it to the end to see how severe it is, where it goes, what are the possibilities.
Surely that's a very logical and reasonable request.
It is. And also it's just incredibly important. Like, I mean, just on a personal note, those families and mothers who came forward and like have spoken openly about these things with their children, like I wouldn't be in the position that I am without them. So like, I'm incredibly thankful to people who do stand up early and stand behind what they believe in and say, no, this has happened to my kid. And like that's a mother is the, no offense, as a father.
It's all good, yeah.
They're interchangeable. Gender is just a construct. But
you'll get more hate from saying that
on
our podcast than
sorry. No, I say it semi-ironically, but
you mean gender roles.
Because what I was about to follow on with is that mothers are the last line of defense between their children and the world, and nothing will come between that. I mean, that's why there's been such a vicious attack on motherhood in general. Is like, and tying it all in to this conversation is why there's been such a push for women to be in the workplace, away from their families. I mean, not only to double taxes, I guess, but to
the family construct.
Yeah, to pull importance from that and just survive rather than thrive. And mothers have an incredibly important job that doesn't take up all of your time. Can speak from experience. In that. So yeah, I'm incredibly thankful to those mums, and I'm incredibly proud to be working with that organisation. It's obviously one of quite a lot of esteem. I'm actually off to Brisbane to launch it officially on Saturday. We've got a nice plug since I've spoken about it. The directors will probably be like, way to shut this in the end. Like talking all your crazy stuff beforehand, but we have a one-day conference, so that's happening in Upper Coomera, which is just outside of the Gold Coast, but it's also being streamed online, so you can go to the Australian website and see who's talking. There's people speaking about all kinds of stuff. Exiting the WHO is another massive campaign that Children's Health Defence is pretty active in. 5G, also an interesting one.
What ways are you working towards potentially making change in those sorts of areas, like getting research done and publicly available? Because a lot of people, if I was to cite some sort of evidence, they'd be like, well, I haven't heard that. And I'm like, well, of course you haven't heard that. So how are we, what's sort of actually What sort of change are you able to implement from that sort of angle?
We work in 3 main streams, and that's education, litigation, and advocacy. And so my role is based in the advocacy side of that. I'm very grassroots and like wanting to get people together and have conversations like this. Litigation is another massive one. So there's been a couple of legal efforts that have gone through. One has been kind of halted, which was the Australian babies case. I don't know if you saw much about that in the news.
No, I don't watch the news.
Well, I mean, when I say the news, I mean our news, independent journalists. But the big one at the moment is an injunction. So basically that they are suing Pfizer and Moderna for the presence of GMOs in their COVID-19 products.
Wow.
And that the correct things were not put in order for them to do so. It's a pretty interesting case, and I don't want to bastardize the language on it. But yes, we're working with one of our directors, Julian Gillespie, who's an incredible human being, and another, Peter Pham, who is the only non-government funded human rights lawyer in Australia. He's an incredible individual as well. Have been working on that, and there's a couple of articles in Brownstone by Julian in regards to that called the Vaccine Files.
Yeah.
And you can also read about the injunction and filings there too.
Wow.
Because I get very caught up in all the legal language of it. But we also, so it's kind of multiple levels. I describe it as like what the work that Peter and Julian are doing is like, you know, we've got all those people attacking us on the other side, and they're up against the door and they're holding the door closed, while the work that I'm doing is building the thing that we need to like overcome it, right? So they're both equally as important as each other, and we can't have one without the other. But yeah, we really need that time. So like there's also submissions that were made for the proposed legislation, which was recognition, like the vaccine discrimination bill that was put forward. So Peter did a submission for us for that. And then most recently he's put a submission forward for the misinformation bill as well, because that's going to directly affect, as it will you.
And I was going to finish it up
because we aren't the ABC. We can talk for as long as you like. Give him like a Alex Jones length episode. So I'm all for it.
Let's talk about the misinformation bill, because that misinformation bill is.
I haven't read it in full yet. I've just done the Cliff's Notes.
So the Cliff Notes give us a little bit of a. I haven't looked into it enough.
You're putting the burden of responsibility on me, you cheeky bugger.
But I am nervous. As I'm nervous about people go, oh, you're so brave. I'm so glad there's people speaking out openly about these sorts of topics, or any topic, because we talk about anything. I don't think anything of it, and then sometimes I'm like, this. So, for example, this episode is going to ruffle some feathers. This episode is going to piss some people off.
Do you know what's so funny?
And do you know what? Not listeners. People will see a clip and they'll be like, "Oh, Branch, I can't believe you've let her on," or I can't believe you have that thought about this. I don't have any thoughts about anything. I'm just very open to discussion and open to whenever I see censorship, I start to go, what the fuck are you censoring? Why are you stopping people having open dialogues?
Yeah, they seem very to avoid answering that question, don't they? For the safety. See, this is the thing. We're obsessed with safety. I have a news flash. So this is back to my own personal opinion now. I have a news flash for people. Life is a risk. You're born with it.
You're not getting out alive.
You aren't getting out alive. And there is something to be said for minimizing risk. But when that starts to kind of change, like it hits a certain point and it's becoming, we're
ridding ourselves of this ability to be able to navigate through situations ourselves, and we're just being told to blindly trust this narrative that's given to us by the state that wants us to be in their control, And I don't say that in a tinfoil hat sort of side of things. I just say
they've
that
made it very clear,
yeah,
and particularly in the last 12 months, they have made it abundantly clear that there is no regard for our choices.
Yeah.
Unless
say.
you toe the party line, and anyone who isn't needs to be shut down.
And we're edging so close every single day, closer to
usually one of my morphino. Sorry, I just realised that again, personal opinions.
Yes, we are edging closely towards something not too dissimilar from the social credit system in China. Like every day.
Yeah.
Little bits at a time. We are that close. And people don't know, don't understand, or just blind to it. Just head in the sand, don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm banging my head against a brick wall when that comes up, because it's like, what is the solution to that problem? And I think that's why I've tried so hard to understand why. Like, what is the antidote to that line of thinking? How do you invest people in...
It's
because like all I'm asking for is freedom of choice.
Yeah.
I'm not pushing anything.
No.
I'm not telling you how to live your life, what to do. I really don't care. No further than I wish you the best, and like from human to human, love you and want that experience for you. But that people are so willing to stand by while we're having those things taken away.
And this is where I see the world at the moment, because Delby doesn't necessarily agree with this. He thinks there are evil people in the world, and I do agree there are evil people in the world. But I do think that people on both sides of every argument, generally, nothing in absolutes, always have everyone's best interests at heart. They want nothing but the best for everyone. COVID vax, for example, we use that as an example. If I'm preaching, don't get the vax, there's risks, blah, 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 I'm saying it out of love because I care. I don't want you to suffer. Yeah. And the other side saying, get the vax because I want you to be safe. We're both coming at it from a place of love. Same with the war in Ukraine. Support, like whatever the topic, it's always coming at it. We need to support Ukraine because we love them. And you're saying, well, let's get out of Ukraine so we can stop people dying. Like everyone's coming at it from a place of love. We just disagree on the path to get there. And I, tinfoil hat on here now, feel that's intentional and orchestrated. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said to you, it's becoming harder and harder with that thing of like don't put down to malice what you can't put down to incompetence. Like it's really hard to not do that and to not think that this is completely orchestrated, and that, I mean, certain events might not be, but they certainly are very quick to see how they can leverage that event to their benefit the most. And with the coming from it, at both sides and with love, and people do generally lean towards doing good rather than bad. Most people would lean that way. I think it does come back to this concept of safety in, not being different, or the safety of conformity. Because when you say that, my instinct, just from my personal lived experience, is that you also have to be okay, regardless of what side you sit on. You can say those things. You can say just do it, or you can say please don't do it. I had one person in my life who I said, like, I didn't talk to anyone else about it. I had one person in my life who I said, please don't do this. And here's my reasons why. And that was because I owed that to someone else. But the second part of that is really apparent to me is you have to be okay with that person saying thanks but no thanks. Yes. And that's the issue, is that we're so, like, we cling to this idea so fearfully. I don't know whether it's because we don't understand it or like we're scared or whatever. We cling to this idea and we push it and we push it and we say, you have to
for me to feel good about myself, for me to understand my place in the world and where I sit in society, I need you to do the thing that I'm doing. And that's both sides. That's not just one side.
Yes.
Because I had to take a break from all of this last year because it was becoming too much. And I felt like I had slingshot from one side to the other. And I found myself somewhere in the middle and very, very alone.
I think it's because people see that rejection as an indication that you are wrong. And they don't like that.
And
whereas it's not you are wrong and I am right. We just disagree. And that's completely fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
What about we're both right? Because I'm right for my life and you're right for your life.
Individual
And
choice.
I at least have a base level of respect for you where that's okay for you. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for detachment as well, which, you know, again, this is just a big old stew. It's really hard to separate all of these things because they play into each other so intricately. It does. Look at me. I'm not letting you enter. Have you noticed?
No, it's fine. I like it. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think all of our listeners would have liked this conversation. I'm very conscious of any conversation I have on here, and it's hard not to. I'm very conscious of any conversation I have on here not being an echo chamber, and just like posturing to our listeners, tell them what they want to hear.
I don't really know what they want to hear. I just know the bits that I want to hear. I've kind of been sitting here realizing, people are probably not going to like what I'm saying right now, but that's okay.
They might not like some of what you said, but they might really resonate with something you've said. And I think that's the whole beauty of a long form conversation. We're seeing it so much more often. I said this the other day, our comedian episodes bomb.
Really?
Yeah. When I say bomb, they still go well. But in comparison to a topical conversation, people are interested in listening and learning. And there's room for comedy and there's room for fun and jest and laughter and let's just fucking have a fun episode that you can zone out to. It's there. But people want to sit back for a few hours and listen and learn and hear someone else's perspective and maybe disagree with something. I listen to Rogan.
I apologise, listeners.
I'll listen to Rogan and love 90% of what he says. And 10% of it I'll be like, no, I don't agree with you, Joe. But do you know what I mean? Like, so, or it might be Jordan Peterson. Like, people fucking hate him. Some people love him. I'm like, 80, 90, 70% of what he said, I'll be like, you make a very good point. Didn't like that part, but I love that part. And I think that's the whole beauty in a long format conversation. Tate, and I've used 3 more very controversial figures.
He's such a piece of...
So some people hate him like that.
It doesn't mean he hasn't had good points.
Exactly.
He seems to have terrible interpersonal skills and has treated some women not very nice.
I totally agree. But some of the messaging he has is incredible as well. So it's just like, this is why I don't think we need to have echo chambers. We don't have to have, like we had on a body positivity advocate. And, And I think these conversations are important and I want to continue to have them and I want to continue to grow as a podcast and as a person and have my opinions changed. And I think that's a characteristic of anyone that someone should be proud of, having the ability to change their opinion. Yeah,
for sure. These conversations are super important, and I think that the echo chamber thing is definitely something we're all quite guilty of. It's almost like you can't exit it until you get tired of it. So like I went through a massive Peterson phase when I was pregnant.
Jordan.
Yeah. Yep. All I listened to, my son used to kick when those lectures were on.
Wow, because there must have been something going on. Wow. And
I was like, all right, cool. And I did understand. Have you understand my personality?
No.
Oh, it really, really.
Is it a survey?
Tool. It is. It's a survey that he developed.
I've seen the ad for that recently.
Understand myself.
I seen. Is he doing that with the Daily Wire, or is it in coordination with?
It may be. It existed before, but he's obviously made a massive deal with the Daily Wire.
Yeah.
Understand Myself is focusing on these big 5 personality aspects. And so you go through and you answer these 100 questions, and those 100 questions and the way that they measure the answers have been formulated by the study that they did and like the answers that they were receiving. My understanding of it at the time, and it's been a few years since I've done it, was that your submissions also impacted. So it was like a living thing in that it constantly, to remain consistent, was constantly growing, like pulling from all of those answers. But I may be wrong on that. But it was super interesting in these like 5 big aspects of your personality, and then those were broken down into 2 or 3 things. So like openness was one of them. Conscientiousness sat in another. I'm struggling to remember all of them now, but it's an incredibly interesting program, because like what it does is when it gives you your answers, it measures it out of 100. So 100 people are in a room, here's where you sit on conscientiousness.
Okay.
100 people are in a room, here's where you sit in openness. And it will give you little notes of like, oh, well, women are more inclined to openness than men,
Wow.
for instance.
Okay.
Or like
And
politically identifying left people are more inclined to this than politically identifying right.
And how does this survey? I guess it helps you understand yourself, but how does that? How does that help better you in general life? Is that just if you have a better understanding of yourself, you're better equipped to handle certain situations because you know this is how I feel because of this?
Well, as someone who scored in a room of 100 people, where do you sit in conscientiousness? 17. It goes, I need to pull my finger out and get to work. I did understand myself for the first time when I was, they say to do it when you're feeling neutral. I was feeling I had been through in a state of depression. Like I had been a little low.
After veganism? Like, seriously?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Because my only time of ever feeling vulnerable in anxiety, panic attacky, and not panic attacky, having panic attacks, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously caused by the overlying COVID restrictions, pandemic, lockdowns, going to lose my job, going through a divorce all by myself, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It was also whilst I was vegetarian.
Yeah, look.
And I've been hearing some data suggesting that's not uncommon, but
it isn't uncommon, and it's not.
Not that I'm demonising.
It's not all people.
Yes.
Some people flourish on it, but yeah, no. There was a when those things. I think those things have always been present for me, but when they became prevalent and unmanageable was after that period, and it's taken a really long time to recover. Like I only just feel like myself for the first time since I was a child, probably in the last 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
And it's been a long road to get here, but yeah. But it does help you in that way, and gives you a little bit, because it's been crafted in such a way. You can't, it's not like a Myers-Briggs where you can rig it and go, oh yeah, I'm this type. It's something that's a bit more impervious to that. And so you do get some called out on a few stark realities, and you go, oh, okay, that's something I can focus on. And I mean, it very conveniently ties in with his self-authoring program, which is, these things are designed for people who are at a point where they're taking stock of their lives and seeing where they want to move through to next. But yeah, I was super obsessed with him. I can't watch him anymore.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yes, I am similar. I can hear some of his older stuff and take value from it, but
COVID's fundamentalized a lot of people.
Yes.
On both sides. On both sides of the conversation.
Yeah, it's pushed people to extremes, and they're making comment on things that are no longer relevant to them. Or
and it's also like, why would you want to do that, or why do you feel the need to, especially if you've got such an amazing specialty, and like he wasn't short on material. in his realm of
Yes.
his profession, and I mean, yeah, kind of got caught up in a debate and sidetracked, and then it's become this thing. I've really felt the push back because, like, obviously I've listened to Corey's episodes and I've heard him talk about this thing of like a ride out of spite.
Yeah.
But I find it just as insufferable.
Yeah.
And I really struggle with this. I find it just as like a kind of oppressive and dogmatic in that way. I really, really hate it.
Oh, I totally agree.
I'd rather talk to you.
Yeah. And
then watch like even Rogan. Like I can't enjoy those podcasts. I watched the one that Bobby was on because I had a vested interest in. Obviously, he's taken a leave of absence and is pursuing another thing right now. But I was interested to hear what he had to say, and I was interested to hear what Rogan had to say about it, because when I originally stopped listening to Rogan was an episode he did with Tom Segura, which was prior to the vaccine being released.
Yeah.
And he said, anyone who doesn't take it's an idiot.
Yeah.
And I went, you of all people.
Yeah. Well, he very quickly changed his tune on that, obviously.
He
but,
did. I think I need a personal apology for I'm back on board 100%. Once those things are said, it's really hard to kind of move past it. Obviously, he's done so much for us in terms of exposure. So
he has
certainly redeemed himself. But it just made me like, oh, that's a shame. I don't feel like I can enjoy that one anymore.
Yeah.
And I much rather connecting with people, and I much rather enjoy exploring broader ideas of where we are as a society, because I'm so much more interested in where we're going from here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's completely not related at all and a total another ramble, but like AI, for instance.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for AI.
Are you?
Like, and not in that I like what it does. Obviously there are a lot of things that are scary with it, but like I was talking about this with a friend, and it's like when we talk about this kind of renaissance, and an older way dying, or like a new emergence, it's like the antidote to AI is live performance. And just like COVID, it's going to separate the wheat from the chaff, and we're going to have this kind of separation. Let the people who want to be entertained by AI be entertained by it. You lose nothing. Find new ways. Enjoy live performance. Like how amazing, how lucky for us that there's going to be a space for us to create those things. And you know, the smart ones are building the infrastructure for that now. Yeah. So that when the people are ready, it's all set up and good to go.
Is that a tip of the cap?
It's a little one. Watch this space. I got my finger in a lot of pies lately. A lot of pies.
Classic.
But yeah, it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to find a cool way. Oh, am I there? Hello. I'm trying to find a cool way to mix it all in for people.
Yeah.
In that we live in a really magical place.
Yeah. So much for people to experience.
We are blessed. Oh my God. I'm cringing at myself right now. But it's true.
Yes.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes the cliches are...
They are the most beautiful. The most tragic things in life are the most beautiful, more often than not. And after everything we've been through, to have moments like this one, it is a blessing, and we're going to move forward to something that's different and hopefully rewarding and hopefully nourishing, and we have to have faith in that and just stick to our guns. And
it is almost what I talk about a lot with the hardship creating a contextual feeling for easier things. It's the same. It's like when the full freedom of expression and the room for error is removed because of AI, you'll start to have an appreciation for things in art where
Holy mackerel, that's a long time. All right, so in this conversation,
2 hours and 40 minutes.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I need to go for a week.
Ironclad, dude. I told you. I'm good.
You've done very well.
So, forget what I was going to say now. Take it back. What was the last
The
thing
art
you said?
and the AI and the context and creating it's a context for like the freedom of expression and art and error, because I think
yeah, look at how many mistakes I've made in the 2 hours and 40 minutes that we've been talking, probably because this is my first time doing this, and
I think you're being hypercritical of yourself, like we spoke about.
So what? That maybe I am. That's okay.
That's part of it.
That's part of it, but it's also like it's something new. Old me, pre-COVID me, would go home and beat myself up about it. I can't believe that I did that.
Yes.
Branchy's never going to talk to me again. He thinks I'm an idiot. All of those horrible things, of which some could be true.
Yeah, I'm never talking to you again.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, of
really,
course.
in my grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, and it's okay. And I think we all intellectualize these things too much instead of embodying them and taking care of them. Like, you need to take care of those icky feelings and just keep moving forward. And I really have a faith that that's something that we're moving towards. And also, have fun.
Yeah.
That's a lesson that I've taken from this. I had all of that taken away from me, and essentially told that I couldn't do it. And I believed that.
Yeah.
So I let that take hold, and then that's come back, and now all I want to do is follow the things that I like. So this year, the very reason that I'm sitting here is because at the beginning of this year, I said to myself, any flippant, ridiculous idea that you have, follow through.
Yeah.
Low conscientiousness. You suck at following through. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And we're coming up to the end of August, and I'm at risk of losing one thing, but we'll push it through. But I've committed to it, and it's given me incredible opportunities. Things that I would never have dreamed of happening have happened to me. And that seems to be the only way.
Yeah.
And I used to joke and say, they'll drag me singing to the gulag because also, like, that's just my dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
And also my family came here post-World War II. Yeah. So there's, an epigenetic memory in there that's going, it could happen.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. If the way that we want things is one option, and the way that we really don't want things is the other.
Yes.
I've got this time now where I'm living in this system, and there are amazing parts of it.
Yep.
And it could be as mundane as walking down the street to the park with my kid, or it could be an opportunity to go to a rock show and hang out with some really cool people.
I know what you're talking about there.
And I think that needs to be, like, I'm not going to let that be taken away from me again. And I'm just going to go full force into it. And that's where these cool ideas come from. And that's how we push towards the future that we want. And I do sound preachy. I can hear it.
No, well, if you didn't ask Corey to be introduced on that evening at the conference.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to any Hard Yarns listeners. If you come up to me and ask to be on,
please don't do that, and don't do it to Corey. He will hate me forever.
I'm going to tell you right now that the one way that you don't get on the podcast is asked to come on the podcast, because
there's definitely a context.
Yes,
to that situation, because I was there on a professional level as well.
Yes,
and that's the thing. That's how that happens.
If you didn't ask Corey to introduce us after, this wouldn't have happened. So you're seeking out what you want, which is good, and I think that's it's an incredible thing to do. And
a lot of amazing people that know.
And sometimes it's not always going to work.
No.
Just like what you said when you were trying to give someone potential advice, you have to be willing to accept that they're not necessarily going to take it. Just like if you're going to have a crack at something, you're not necessarily going to succeed.
Yeah. You just got to love them.
You just got to have a crack.
Yeah. Work hard. Love the people around you.
And no absolutes.
And no absolutes. That's a very good way to wind it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was good. I like this episode.
Oh, see the good. I'm not trusting that good. 100%.
No, I'm trying to be. I'm trying to temper my response to it. I've really enjoyed this. This has probably been one of my most enjoyable experiences doing a podcast. I'm not lying.
No.
I'm not lying. It's been good. Easy conversation. No Delby into
I still haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, Delby, but one day.
Yeah, 100%. But thank you very much for coming on. And
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't lose too many sponsors or anything.
Is it John?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, love your work, John.
Yeah, he's good.
Stick with the fellas.
Yeah, but awesome. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.